Hey everyone, tonight we're traveling to the Slavic forests of Eastern Europe, to Russia, to Poland, to Ukraine and beyond, to a place where birch trees grow thick and old, where villages end abruptly at the tree line, and where stories are still told about a witch who lives just beyond the edge of everything familiar. Her name is Baba Yaga, and if you've heard of her at all, you've probably heard contradictions. Some stories say she eats children. Others say she helps heroes on impossible quests. Some describe her as evil incarnate. Others call her wise, powerful, even necessary. The truth, like most folklore, is more complicated than a single label. Before we begin, go ahead and like this video and subscribe if you're enjoying the content. And drop a comment. Where are you watching from? What time is it where you are? And have you ever heard of Baba Yaga before tonight? If you're from Russia, Poland, or anywhere in Eastern Europe, did your grandparents tell you stories about her? Did they warn you about going into the forest alone? Did they teach you the proper way to address her if you ever found yourself at her door? I'd love to hear what you were taught. Now settle in, maybe turn on some ambient sounds, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. We're going to explore why Baba Yaga helped some visitors and ate others. What separated those who walked away with magical gifts, with their lives, with impossible problems solved, from those who became her next meal, their bones added to the fence that surrounds her hut. And what this witch, feared and respected in equal measure, reveals about Slavic culture, morality, survival, and the forests that shaped all three. To understand Baba Yaga, you first need to understand the forest. Not just any forest. The Slavic forest. The deep woods that stretch across Russia, Poland, Ukraine, and beyond. Miles and miles of birch and pine, of underbrush so thick you can't see 10 feet ahead, of marshes and clearings and ancient trees that were old when your grandparents were young. These forests are not parks. They're not hiking trails with markers, maps, and ranger stations. They're ancient, dense, and fundamentally other. A place where the normal rules of the village don't apply. Where time moves differently. Where you can get lost walking in a straight line. Where the paths shift when you're not looking. In Slavic culture, going back centuries, the forest was alive. Not metaphorically alive in some poetic sense. The people who told these stories, who lived in these villages, genuinely believed the forest had consciousness, intention, and memory. It watched you. It remembered how you treated it. And it responded accordingly. The world's first surveillance system, essentially, except the cameras were trees, and there was no customer service department to complain to. The forest provided everything life required. Wood for houses, for heat, for cooking. Game for food, deer and boar and rabbits. Berries in summer, mushrooms in autumn, herbs for medicine year-round. The forest was generous to those who respected it, who took only what they needed, who thanked it for its gifts. But the forest also took. Children wandered in and never came out. Hunters went after game and disappeared. Travelers who strayed from known paths were found days later, if they were found at all, confused and unable to explain where they'd been or how they'd survived. Some came back changed, speaking strangely, seeing things others couldn't see. Time didn't work correctly in the forest. You could walk for what felt like an hour and emerge to find 3 days had passed in the village. Or you could walk all day, exhausted and desperate, only to discover you'd traveled maybe a few hundred meters, somehow circling back on yourself without realizing. The trees shifted. The paths closed behind you. The forest decided when you could leave. GPS would have been useless here. Actually, GPS would probably have filed a complaint and quit. Sounds carried strangely. You'd hear voices calling your name from directions where no one could be. You'd hear footsteps following you, but when you turned, nothing. Bird calls that sounded almost like words. Wind through branches that sounded almost like laughter. The forest played with you, tested you, judged you. And at the edge of this forest, where the village fields ended and the wild began, where civilization stopped and chaos started. That's where Baba Yaga lived. She existed at the boundary, the threshold, the liminal space between the known world and everything beyond it, between human order and natural disorder, between safety and danger, between life and death. Villages in this part of the world were built with this boundary in mind. The layout was deliberate. Houses faced inward, toward the center of the village, toward each other. Not welcoming exactly, but acknowledging that survival required community, cooperation, watching each other's backs. Fields were cleared carefully, maintained religiously. Every stump removed, every rock cleared. The village imposed order on the land through constant work. The church stood at the heart, physically and symbolically. It represented God, civilization, morality, the Christian order that replaced older beliefs but never quite eliminated them. Church bells marked time. Priests conducted rituals. The building itself was an anchor point, a reminder that humans had rules, structure, divine oversight. And at the edges, where the plowing stopped and the trees began, that's where people hesitated. That's where mothers called their children back. That's where travelers paused before entering. That's where the world changed from one thing into another. Baba Yaga's hut sat exactly on this line, sometimes described as being just inside the tree line, visible from the last field if you knew where to look. Sometimes placed deeper in a clearing, surrounded by forest, accessible only if you knew the way or if the forest allowed you through. But always on a threshold, always in that space between, never fully in the village world, never fully in the deep forest. Right on the edge, where both worlds touched. Her hut was distinctive, impossible to mistake for anything else. It wasn't built on a foundation of stone or set on wooden posts like normal houses. It stood on chicken legs. Massive, scaly, clawed chicken legs that held the structure several feet off the ground and allowed it to move. The hut could walk, not quickly, not gracefully, but it moved. The chicken legs would shift, joints bending in ways that looked wrong, talons digging into earth and pulling the structure forward or turning it in place. The movement was accompanied by creaking wood, groaning joints, the scrape of claws on stone. When the hut walked across rocky ground, it sounded alive. It sounded aware. Slavic folklore had a lot of mobile architecture. Regular houses on normal foundations were apparently too boring. When you approached Baba Yaga's hut, it might not be facing you. The door could be turned away, toward the forest, toward the deep woods, deliberately ignoring your presence. You could stand there for hours, and the hut wouldn't acknowledge you. It was waiting for something, for the right words, for the correct approach, for respect. To get the hut to turn, to face you, to give you access, you had to speak a specific phrase. The wording varied slightly depending on region and dialect, but the structure was consistent. Little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. Little hut. Diminutive. Respectful in the way you'd speak to a grandmother or a small child. Not, hey, house, or turn around. Polite. Requesting, not demanding. If you said the words correctly, if your tone was respectful, the hut would respond. The chicken legs would shift, talons scraping and digging, finding purchase. The entire structure would groan as it began to rotate. Wood creaking, joints popping. The sound of a building that shouldn't be alive moving like a living thing. It turned slowly, ponderously, until the door faced you directly. If you got the words wrong, if you demanded instead of asked, if you were rude or impatient, the hut stayed turned away. You could shout. You could plead. You could stand there until you died of exposure. The hut wouldn't move. First test failed. Go home. The door, when it finally faced you, was small. Too small for an adult to enter comfortably. Maybe waist high, maybe a bit taller. You couldn't walk through it normally. You had to stoop. You had to bow. You had to lower your head, bend your back, make yourself smaller to fit. This wasn't an accident of construction. It wasn't that Baba Yaga was short and built the door to her own height. It was deliberate, intentional. You couldn't enter her home with your head held high. You couldn't march in confidently. You had to humble yourself physically just to cross the threshold. If you tried to force your way through without bowing, you'd crack your skull on the frame or scrape your shoulders raw on the sides. The architecture demanded submission. Surrounding the hut was a fence, and this fence made the walking hut look almost normal by comparison. It was made entirely of bones, human bones. Femurs, tibias, ribs, vertebrae, all lashed together with sinew, rope, or in some versions, simply held together by magic. The posts were made of leg bones, thick and sturdy. The crossbars were arm bones and ribs. The whole structure a monument to everyone who'd come before and failed. And topping each fence post, crowning it, was a skull. Human skulls, sometimes bleached white by sun and weather, sometimes still carrying scraps of hair or flesh in the older, darker versions of the tail. These skulls served a function. At night, after sunset, they glowed. Their empty eye sockets lit up with an eerie pale light, or with fire, depending on which version you heard. The entire fence became a ring of watching, glowing eyes after dark. Dozens of skulls, dozens of pairs of eyes, all staring outward into the forest or inward into the yard, or at you as you stood there trying to decide if you really wanted to do this. The message was very clear. These were people who came before, visitors who sought Baba Yaga's help, and these skulls, this fence, represented the ones who failed, the ones who were rude, the ones who lied, the ones who tried to trick her or threaten her, or steal from her. Now they served as her fence, and their skulls lit her property at night. Practical and efficient. Baba Yaga doesn't waste resources. When life gives you failed visitors, you make fence posts. It's just good project management. The gate to the yard had its own grotesque details, described in some of the older, darker versions of the tailies. The hinges were made from human legs, still jointed at the knee, bending in ways that let the gate swing open and closed. The lock was fashioned from a mouth, teeth interlocking to hold the gate secure. The bolt was made from skeletal hands that clasped together when closed, released when opened. Every element of entry required you to confront what happened to failures. Medieval home security, basically. Much more effective than a doorbell camera. You weren't casually walking into Baba Yaga's yard. You were pushing past the physical remnants of people who made mistakes you'd better not repeat. The yard itself was bare earth, packed hard from centuries of the hut's chicken legs walking across it. No grass, no garden, nothing decorative. Sometimes described as having a well, sometimes not. Usually just empty space between the fence and the hut, and always the sense of being watched. By the skulls, by the forest, by Baba Yaga herself from inside the hut, by things you couldn't see but could definitely feel. Inside the hut, the space was larger than it should have been. Fairy tale logic, folk magic. The rules of normal architecture didn't apply to a house that walked. The interior was dominated by a massive stone oven, the kind used for baking bread in peasant homes, except this one was enormous. The oven took up nearly half the hut's interior space, large enough to bake many loaves at once. Large enough, in the grimmer interpretations, to fit a person. Large enough to cook someone if Baba Yaga decided that's what the situation required. Baba Yaga was often found lying on top of this oven when visitors arrived. The top of the oven was the warmest place in the hut, and elderly Russians in particular often slept on top of ovens during winter. But Baba Yaga's position on it was described more strangely. Her body stretched out, long and angular, all sharp elbows and bony knees. Her nose nearly touching the ceiling because she was too tall to sit up comfortably inside her own home. She had to fold herself into the space, compress herself, fit her ancient body into the confines of the hut, all limbs and angles and iron teeth gleaming in the firelight from below. The rest of the hut was filled with the accumulation of a long, long life. Shelves lined the walls, holding clay pots, glass jars, wooden boxes. Some contained herbs, dried and bundled. Some contained powders, liquids, things you probably couldn't identify and definitely didn't want to ask about. Some jars held objects, stones with strange markings, bones from animals you couldn't name, feathers, claws, teeth, things preserved in liquids that had long ago gone cloudy. Bundles of dried plants hung from the rafters. Some you might recognize: sage, thyme, mushrooms strung on threads. Others were completely unfamiliar. Everything gave off scents: smoke from the oven, sharp herbal smells, earth, old wood, something vaguely medicinal, something vaguely like decay. Not a pleasant combination, but not as horrific as you might expect. Just the smell of a place that's been lived in for a very long time by someone who has no interest in impressing visitors. The floor was dirt, packed hard over centuries of use, smoothed by countless footsteps. The walls were wood, dark with age and soot from the oven. Small windows, if any, covered with shutters or cloth. The light came mostly from the oven's fire, and in some versions, from those same glowing skulls, smaller ones kept inside as lanterns. The interior was dim, smoky, intimate in a way that made you aware of every movement, every sound. Some versions described additional details. A broom in the corner, the same silver birch broom, Baba Yaga used to sweep away her tracks when flying. The mortar and pestle she traveled in, sitting near the door, massive and made of stone. A black cat that watched you with yellow eyes. 3 horses in a stable outside, sometimes described as the horses of morning, noon, and midnight, magical creatures that pulled the sun across the sky. These details varied by region and storyteller, but they all added to the same impression. This was not a normal place. This was not a normal witch. And you should be very, very careful about what you said and did in the next few minutes. This was Baba Yaga's domain, not welcoming, not comfortable, but undeniably hers. And if you wanted her help, if you needed what only she could provide, you entered on her terms, into her space, and accepted that you were completely at her mercy. The forest around the hut was never quiet. Birds called, though if you listened carefully, their calls sometimes sounded wrong. Too sharp, too rhythmic, almost like language. Branches rustled even when there was no wind, or when the wind was blowing the opposite direction. Things moved in the underbrush, glimpsed only from the corner of your eye, gone when you tried to look directly. Shadows that didn't match their sources. Smells that appeared and vanished. Pine, decay, flowers, smoke, things you couldn't name. The forest was always watching, always listening. Reporting back to Baba Yaga, you were never truly alone once you entered her territory. The birds saw you. The trees heard you. The earth recorded your footsteps. And Baba Yaga, in her hut on chicken legs, knew you were coming long before you arrived. This is where our stories begin. At the edge of the known world, in front of a hut on chicken legs, surrounded by human bones and glowing skulls. You've come this far because you're desperate, or brave, or foolish, or some combination of all three. You've left the safety of the village behind. You've walked through the forest that confuses and tests everyone who enters. You've found the hut, spoken the words, watched it turn to face you. The door is open. Baba Yaga is inside, waiting. What happens next depends entirely on you, on how you speak, how you behave, whether you understand the rules, whether you can pass the tests, and whether Baba Yaga decides you're worth helping or worth eating. Now let's talk about Baba Yaga herself, her appearance, her presence, and the immediate impression she makes on anyone unfortunate or fortunate enough to meet her in person. Baba Yaga is old, not elderly in the sense of a grandmother who bakes cookies and tells gentle stories. Old in a way that suggests she's been here since the forest first grew, since the first villages were built, since the first humans looked into the dark woods and wondered what lived there, ancient beyond counting. Her exact age is never specified because it's impossible to specify. She's simply always been. Her appearance reflects this impossible age. Her skin is wrinkled, deeply lined, creased from centuries of weather and time and whatever experiences shape a forest witch. Sometimes described as pale, gray as old bone. Sometimes described as darkened from smoke and sun, weathered like tree bark. Her face is gaunt, all sharp angles and prominent bones, cheekbones that jut, eye sockets deep, jaw sharp, nothing soft, nothing yielding, everything hard edges. Her nose is legendary in the stories, long, hooked, curving down toward her chin. In many descriptions, her nose and chin are so pronounced, so extended, that they nearly touch when she closes her mouth. Her profile looks like a crescent moon. A witch's nose in the classic sense, except this one existed in folklore centuries before Disney invented their version. This was the original, and it was taken seriously by people who genuinely feared meeting its owner. Her teeth are iron, not figuratively strong like iron, not iron-colored, literally made of iron. Metal teeth that replaced her original ones, or that she was born with, or that she created through magic. The stories don't specify how she got them. They just describe them. Iron teeth that gleam dully in firelight. Iron teeth that screech slightly when she grinds them together. Iron teeth that, in some versions, are rusty, stained with brown and red that might be rust, or might be dried blood, or might be both. Dental insurance didn't cover this procedure. When Baba Yaga smiles, and she does smile when something amuses her, or when she's made a decision about your fate, it's unsettling. The iron teeth catch the light. The smile stretches too wide, showing too much metal. The sound, that faint metallic scraping, accompanies the expression. It's not a comforting smile. It's not warm. It's the smile of someone who knows something you don't, and what she knows will probably determine whether you live or die in the next few hours. Her hair is wild, long gray or white, tangled and unkempt. She doesn't bother with braiding or pinning, or any of the ways women in villages kept their hair controlled. It hangs loose around her face, down her back, sometimes catching on things, sometimes seeming to move on its own when there's no breeze to explain it. In some descriptions, it looks less like hair and more like a nest of twigs or dried grass. In others, it's simply neglected, uncombed for so long it's become its own entity. Her body is tall and thin, but wrong, somehow. Proportions that don't quite match human norms. Too long, too angular. When she stands fully upright, she has to hunch to fit under her own ceiling. Her limbs are bony, all sharp elbows and protruding knees. Her fingers are long, extended, ending in nails that are described in various ways, sometimes as claws, sometimes simply as long and yellowed from neglect, sometimes as blackened and sharp. She's made of angles and edges, nothing soft, nothing curved, just straight lines and points. Baba Yaga wears simple clothing, peasant garb, a long dress or robe, usually described as rough fabric, wool, or linen. It's tattered, patched in places, stained from cooking, and living in a smoky hut, and doing whatever it is she does in the forest. The hem is often filthy, dragging through dirt and ash. The sleeves are frayed. There are burn marks from leaning too close to the oven. She's not trying to impress anyone. She has no vanity. She doesn't care what you think of her appearance. The clothes are functional, and nothing more. But despite the simple, worn clothing, despite the haggard appearance, there's power in how she moves. She's not frail. The age doesn't make her weak. She's strong in a wiry, dangerous way. She can lift heavy iron pots. She can manipulate the massive stone mortar she flies in. When she grabs someone, and she does in some stories, her grip is described as painful, iron-strong, impossible to break. The age is deceptive. She's ancient, yes, but she's not fragile. Her voice varies depending on the story and the teller. Sometimes it's a croak, rough and low, damaged from centuries of smoke and shouting. Sometimes a cackle, sharp and piercing, the stereotypical witch laugh that exists in folklore for a reason. Other times it's surprisingly measured and calm, almost conversational, like a normal old woman discussing the weather. She can speak however she wants. She can be loud when angry, whispering when curious, utterly silent when she's thinking, deciding, evaluating whether you'll live or become part of her fence. Her eyes are perhaps her most important feature. Sharp, penetrating, knowing. Some versions describe them as glowing, particularly at night or when she's angry. Others simply describe them as ancient and aware, eyes that have seen too much for too long. The color varies. Sometimes black, sometimes pale gray, sometimes an indeterminate color that seems to shift depending on the light. But what matters isn't the color. It's the quality of her gaze. When Baba Yaga looks at you, she's not seeing your face. She's not noting your clothes or your physical appearance. She's seeing deeper. She's reading you, your intentions, your character, your lies, if you're foolish enough to try. You cannot hide from that gaze. You cannot pretend to be something you're not. She sees through everything to what you actually are beneath the performance. And she makes her decisions based on that, not on how you look or what you claim. Now let's talk about how Baba Yaga travels, because she doesn't just stay in her hut waiting for visitors. She moves through the forest. She visits places. She conducts business, whatever that business might be for a forest witch. And her method of travel is as distinctive as everything else about her. She flies in a mortar. A giant mortar, the kind peasants used to grind grain into flour, except this one is enormous. Large enough for Baba Yaga to sit in, her long legs folded, her body hunched, fitting herself into the bowl-shaped vessel. It's made of stone or iron, depending on the version, heavy, solid, clearly not designed for flight. And yet it flies. She steers with the pestle, the heavy club normally used for pounding grain. She holds it like a rudder, angling it to direct her movement, using it to maintain altitude or descend. The physics make no sense. The imagery is absurd. An old woman flying through the air in a stone bowl, steering with a club. And yet, it's one of the most enduring images in all of Slavic folklore, repeated in countless tales, illustrated in countless drawings and paintings. Aerodynamics was clearly optional in medieval Russia. And as she flies, she sweeps away her tracks behind her, using a broom made of silver birch. The broom erases the path she took through the sky, making it impossible to follow her or trace where she's been. Some versions suggest this is for secrecy, that she doesn't want people finding her hut. Others suggest it's simply what proper travel requires, that you clean up after yourself even when moving through the air. The sound of her approach is distinctive. The grinding of stone against air, the whoosh of wind through the broom's bristles, the creaking of her own joints as she hunches in the mortar. The sound carries through the forest. You hear her before you see her, and by the time you see her, a dark shape moving between trees, silhouetted against the sky, it's usually too late to hide or run. She's already spotted you. The forest has already reported your presence. Some versions of the stories suggest Baba Yaga can control the wind, that she commands storms, or at least knows when they're coming and can use them. Others say she can speak to animals, particularly birds, who serve as her spies and messengers throughout the forest. Ravens, crows, owls. They watch. They listen. They report back. The forest is her network. Nothing that happens in her territory goes unnoticed. Her relationship with animals is complicated. She's not kind to them in the Disney sense. She doesn't sing to them or befriend them with gentle touches. but she respects them. She understands them. She feeds them and treats them fairly. And they, in turn, serve her loyally. Her hut might be guarded by cats, or a three-headed dog, or birds that watch the fence line and screech warnings when strangers approach. These animals are loyal because Baba Yaga treats them better than most humans would. She's harsh, but she's fair. Animals appreciate that. Baba Yaga herself is not consistently described across all regions and all versions of the tales. In some stories, she's singular, one witch living alone in one hut. In others, there are 3 Baba Yagas, sisters who share knowledge and territory. Go see the Baba Yaga beyond the river, or ask the second Baba Yaga, implying multiple witches with the same name and similar powers. The number doesn't seem to matter as much as the archetype. She's the witch at the edge of the forest, the one who knows things, the one who tests people. Whether there's one of her or 3 of her, the function remains the same. She is neither good nor evil, in the way those words are usually understood in fairy tales. She's not motivated by malice. She doesn't eat people because she enjoys suffering. She's not interested in causing pain for its own sake. But she's also not motivated by kindness or compassion. She doesn't help people because it makes her feel good. She's motivated by her own rules, her own sense of order, her own standards of acceptable behavior. She values certain qualities: respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear. If you demonstrate these, she helps. She might even give you more than you asked for. If you violate her standards, if you're rude or dishonest or arrogant, she punishes. She might eat you. She might curse you. She might simply refuse to help and send you away to face whatever fate you were fleeing. It's not personal. It's principle. She's maintaining order in her domain. And her domain, the threshold between civilization and wilderness, requires very specific rules. Her power is significant. She commands magic, obviously. The walking hut, the flying mortar, the glowing skulls, all evidence of abilities far beyond normal human capacity. She has knowledge of herbs, of spells, of the spirit world, of the connections between things. She knows where to find magical objects, how to cure impossible curses, how to contact entities that most people don't even know exist. She's connected to forces that existed before Christianity, before literacy, before villages. Old powers, forest powers. Powers that don't care about kings or churches or human laws. But she's not all-powerful. She has limitations. She seems bound to her territory, the forest, the threshold. She doesn't march into villages making demands. She doesn't attack travelers who stay on the main paths. She waits in her hut for people to come to her. She tests them when they arrive. She makes her decisions, and those decisions stand. She's powerful within her domain, but that domain has edges. She also seems bound by her own rules. She can't simply eat everyone. She tests them first. She gives them opportunities to pass. If they demonstrate the right qualities, she helps them, even if helping them goes against her initial inclination. There's a fairness to her, a consistency. She's harsh, but she's not arbitrary. You can predict how she'll react if you understand the rules. And those rules matter to her more than any individual outcome. This is the being you're about to meet. An ancient iron-toothed witch who flies in a mortar and lives in a hut that walks on chicken legs. A creature of the forest and the threshold who sees through lies and judges character with brutal efficiency. Someone who might help you, who might give you exactly what you need to solve your impossible problem. Or who might decide you're not worth helping and add your bones to the fence that already surrounds her property. Someone who doesn't explain her decisions, but makes them quickly, based on how you behave in the first few minutes of your interaction. Your approach to her fence, your words at her door, your tone inside her hut. All of this is being evaluated from the moment you enter her territory. And Baba Yaga's evaluation doesn't take long. She's been doing this for centuries. She's seen thousands of visitors. She knows human nature better than humans know themselves. She'll figure you out quickly, probably before you finished your first sentence. The question is, what will she see when she looks at you? Most people who sought out Baba Yaga did so out of desperate necessity. No one casually visits a witch who lives in a walking house surrounded by human bones. No one risks the forest, the threshold, the tests, unless every other option has failed or was never available in the first place. You went to Baba Yaga because someone you loved was dying and no doctor could help. Because you'd been sent on an impossible quest by a king or a stepmother who wanted you gone. Because you were cursed, lost, pursued by enemies or monsters, facing a problem that had no normal solution. Because you were desperate enough to try magic, even knowing magic always had costs. The journey to find her hut was itself a test, though most people didn't realize it at the time. The forest didn't make it easy. Paths twisted back on themselves, leading you in circles, even when you were certain you were walking straight. Landmarks disappeared or moved. That distinctive rock formation you passed an hour ago is in front of you again. That stream you crossed is somehow on your left now when it should be behind you. The trees seemed to close in, cutting off retreat, making the way forward the only option, even though forward led deeper into wilderness and uncertainty. The forest was testing your resolve. How badly do you need this? How much are you willing to endure? Are you brave enough or desperate enough? Or stubborn enough to keep going when everything is trying to turn you around? When your rational mind is screaming that you should give up, go back, try something else? Some people gave up before ever finding the hut. They turned back, frightened or discouraged, or simply exhausted by the forest's resistance. They returned to whatever fate they'd been fleeing, and that fate caught them. Those people never appear in the stories. We only hear about the ones who made it all the way, the ones who persisted despite fear, despite exhaustion, despite the forest's attempts to disorient and discourage them. The survivors, the successful, the ones the forest judged worthy of reaching Baba Yaga. If you made it to the fence, if you pushed through brush and found yourself standing in front of that bone structure with its glowing skull lamps, you'd already passed one significant test. You were brave enough to continue, desperate enough not to turn back, strong enough to push through the forest's natural defenses. That mattered. Not as much as what came next, but it mattered. Standing at the fence, you'd see the hut clearly for the first time. Maybe its back was to you, the door facing the forest, showing you wooden walls, a thatched roof, chicken legs shifted to rest position. Maybe it was side-on, giving you a profile view, letting you see how the chicken legs bent at impossible angles to support the structure. Maybe, if you were lucky, or if Baba Yaga was curious about you, it was already facing your direction, the door visible, waiting. You'd have to call to it. The words had to be respectful. Little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. Sometimes, please was added. Sometimes, I ask you kindly, or if you would. Regional variations. Different families taught it different ways. But the core remained consistent. You asked. You requested. You didn't demand. If you got the tone right, if you approached it correctly, the hut would respond. The chicken legs would shift. First one, then another, talons scraping and digging into earth, finding new purchase. The entire structure would groan as it began to rotate. Wood creaking under stress. Joints that shouldn't exist, making sounds that suggested pain or effort or awareness. The rotation was slow, ponderous, the hut turning like a massive beast responding to its name. And when it finished, the door faced you directly, and the way forward was clear. If you demanded, if you were rude, if you got the words wrong or the tone wrong, the hut stayed turned away. You could stand there shouting until your voice gave out. You could plead and apologize. You could explain your desperate circumstances. The hut wouldn't move. First test failed, and you had two choices. Go home and face whatever you were fleeing, or die in the forest, waiting for a hut that would never acknowledge you. Assuming the hut turned, assuming you'd passed that first test of respect, you'd approach the door. And here you'd notice something immediately. It was small, too small for comfortable entry, maybe waist-high to an average adult, maybe chest-high, certainly not tall enough to walk through normally. You'd have to stoop, bend your back, lower your head, make yourself smaller. You couldn't walk into Baba Yaga's home standing tall, shoulders back, head high. The architecture physically prevented it. If you tried to force through without bowing, you'd crack your skull on the wooden frame or scrape your shoulders raw on the sides. You had to humble yourself just to cross the threshold. This wasn't an accident. This wasn't Baba Yaga being short and building a door to her own proportions. It was deliberate, intentional, a test built into the architecture. You demonstrated humility before even seeing her. You acknowledged, physically, that you were entering someone else's space and needed to show proper deference. If you couldn't bow to enter a door, you certainly couldn't bow to Baba Yaga herself. Better to filter you out now. Inside, the heat would hit you first. The oven radiated warmth, excessive in summer, welcome in winter, always present. Then the smell, smoke from whatever was burning in the oven. Herbs hanging to dry. Earth and old wood. Something cooking or recently cooked, and whether it was soup or bread or something else was not immediately clear. Underlying everything, a scent you couldn't quite place. Not pleasant, not horrific. Just the smell of a place lived in for far too long by someone who didn't prioritize cleanliness. The space would be dim. Your eyes would need time to adjust from the brightness of the clearing outside. The light came from the oven's fire, from embers glowing in the hearth, possibly from those same glowing skulls, smaller versions kept inside as functional lanterns. Shadows moved strangely. The smoke from the oven created layers of haze. You couldn't see the back wall clearly from the door. You had to step further inside to get oriented. And there, on top of the oven or near it, would be Baba Yaga. Long, angular, all bones and sharp edges. Her body stretched out if she was lying down, folded uncomfortably if she was sitting. Her nose prominent even in the dim light. Her iron teeth catching glints of firelight when she opened her mouth. Her eyes ancient and knowing, already watching you, already evaluating, already making decisions you wouldn't understand until much later. Her first words varied depending on the story, the teller, the region. But often they were a challenge, direct and immediate. Have you come of your own free will, or were you sent? This question had weight, layers of meaning. If you came willingly, you were brave or foolish or desperate enough to seek out a witch everyone feared. If you were sent, you were a pawn in someone else's game, potentially someone else's victim, doing this because you had no choice. Neither answer was necessarily wrong. Both revealed something about you. And Baba Yaga listened carefully to how you responded. The question was basically Slavic for, let's establish exactly how much trouble you're in and whose fault it is. Did you hesitate? Did you lie? Did you answer confidently or nervously? Did you understand that the question itself was important, or did you brush past it as small talk? Every micro-reaction mattered. She was already building a profile of you based on a single question and how you handled it. Then came the more important question, the one that got to the heart of why you were standing in her hut, dripping with fear sweat and trying not to stare at her iron teeth. What do you want? And here, right here, many visitors failed immediately. They stammered. They started making up elaborate stories, trying to explain their situations with too much detail, or not enough. They tried to flatter Baba Yaga, calling her beautiful, or wise, or powerful, thinking compliments would buy favor. They didn't. She saw through flattery instantly. She'd heard it all before. It meant nothing. Complimenting a forest witch on her looks is like bringing a fruit basket to a job interview. Technically polite, completely useless. Or they tried to trick her. They'd obscure their real request behind vague language. I seek wisdom, when what they actually wanted was gold. I need guidance, when they actually needed her to solve a problem they were too scared to state clearly. Baba Yaga saw through that too. She always saw through it, and attempting to deceive her was worse than simple rudeness. It showed you thought she was stupid. That mistake had permanent consequences. Or they demanded. They'd state their request as if it was her obligation to provide it. I need you to cure this curse, or you will tell me where to find the firebird, or give me what I came for. Treating her like a servant, like someone who owed them something, like their desperation entitled them to her help. Fatal error. Baba Yaga didn't respond well to demands. She didn't respond to them at all, except to demonstrate precisely what happened to people who gave her orders. The correct approach was simple, though few visitors seemed to grasp it. State your need clearly, honestly, and respectfully. No embellishment, no flattery, no deception, no demands. Just plain truth. I need medicine for my dying mother. I must find the firebird to complete my quest. I require advice about a curse. Whatever it was, state it directly and leave it at that. If you told the truth, if your request was stated properly, Baba Yaga would consider it. She might not grant it immediately. She might test you further, but she'd consider it. The conversation would continue. You'd have passed the second test. If you lied, if you tried to manipulate her, if you were rude or demanding, the conversation ended, right there. And it ended in one of several ways, none of them pleasant. Sometimes Baba Yaga would simply tell you to leave. Sometimes she'd laugh, iron teeth screeching, and invite you to step closer to the oven. Sometimes she'd go silent, and that silence was worse than anything she could say, because it meant she was done evaluating you and had reached her conclusion. After you stated your purpose, assuming you'd done it correctly, Baba Yaga often offered something. Food, usually. A bowl of soup, a piece of bread, some unclear substance that might be porridge or might be something less identifiable. Sometimes drink, water from her well, or kvass or tea. The offering was simple, but the response required was complicated. Do you accept? Do you refuse? Do you hesitate? This was another test, layered and subtle. Generally, accepting the food showed respect. You were in her home. She offered hospitality, limited as it was. Refusing suggested you didn't trust her, that you thought she was trying to poison you, that you considered yourself above eating witch's food. That was insulting. And insulting Baba Yaga was rarely survivable. But the food might also be enchanted. It might be cursed. It might be a genuine test of whether you had manners, or just a way for her to see how you handled uncertainty. You had to read the situation. Read her. Decide based on context that wasn't fully clear and would never be explained. One story tells of a man who was offered soup. The smell was off, unpleasant. His stomach turned at the thought of eating it, but he understood the situation. He understood that refusing would be worse than eating something that tasted bad. So he ate it, slowly, carefully, trying not to grimace. Baba Yaga watched the entire time. When he finished, scraping the bowl clean despite his revulsion, she nodded. You ate food you didn't want because you respected my hospitality. That shows wisdom and self-control, both rare qualities. Another story describes a woman who refused the food outright with barely concealed disgust. I don't eat witch's food. Baba Yaga smiled, iron teeth gleaming dully. Then you won't need to stay for dinner, because you're about to become it. Context, reading the situation, understanding when to accept and when to question. These were survival skills, and you had to develop them immediately, in real time, while terrified and exhausted and facing a witch who'd already decided whether you'd live or die based on factors you probably didn't even realize mattered. After food, or sometimes instead of it, Baba Yaga would often assign a task. Not always. Some visitors' requests were simple enough that she'd just answer immediately if she liked them. But usually, there was work involved. If you want my help, you must earn it. Complete this task, and I'll consider your request. The task was never easy. It was never exactly what it seemed. And it was always designed to reveal something about your character that Baba Yaga wanted confirmed before committing to helping you. Clean my hut. Everything. Every surface, every corner, every object. By morning. Massive. Impossible for one person in one night. But she said it as if it was perfectly reasonable. Fetch water from the stream beyond the hill. Fill this vessel. She'd hand you a container, and only when you got to the stream would you realize it was full of holes, or had no bottom, or was actually a sieve. Sort these seeds from this dirt. She'd dump a massive pile in front of you. Millions of individual grains mixed with soil, ash, small stones. I need them separated. By dawn, the medieval equivalent of data entry, except failing meant becoming dinner instead of getting a bad performance review. Feed my animals. They haven't eaten in 3 days. You'd go to the stable and find creatures that shouldn't exist, or horses that watched you with 2 intelligent eyes, or something worse. These tasks tested different qualities. Cleaning the hut tested humility and work ethic. Were you willing to do manual labor? Did you complain about the difficulty? Did you respect her space and belongings while working? Or did you snoop and pry? Fetching impossible water tested problem solving. Could you adapt when circumstances made success seemingly impossible? Could you think creatively while under pressure? Sorting seeds tested patience and attention to detail. Could you focus on tedious work for hours? Did you cut corners or rush through it? Or did you take the time to do it properly? Feeding animals tested how you treated creatures with less power than you. Were you kind? Efficient? Did you show the same respect to animals that you showed to Baba Yaga herself? The tasks themselves often included built-in temptations or complications. A locked chest in the corner while you're cleaning. Do you open it to see what's inside? Do you respect that it's locked and therefore not your business? A window overlooking something strange while you're working. Do you stop to look, distracted from your assigned task? A pouch of coins left casually on a shelf. Do you take one, thinking Baba Yaga won't notice or won't care? These weren't accidents. Baba Yaga placed them deliberately. She was testing boundaries, testing impulse control, testing whether you'd follow instructions when she wasn't directly watching. And she was always watching, even when you thought she wasn't, from another room, through a crack in the wall, via animals that reported back to her. You were never unobserved in Baba Yaga's hut. One tale describes a young man who found a beautiful knife while cleaning. Ornate handle, sharp blade, clearly valuable. He picked it up, admired it, tested the edge carefully, then put it back exactly where he found it and continued cleaning. When Baba Yaga returned, she asked directly, "Did you see the knife?" He answered honestly, "Yes, grandmother. Why didn't you take it?" "It's not mine." Simple answer. Direct. True. And it impressed her more than elaborate explanations would have. She gave him the knife as a reward later, after he completed the original task he came for. "You respected what was mine, even when you thought I wouldn't know." That deserves recognition. Another tale describes a girl who couldn't resist opening a small box while cleaning. It was right there. It looked old, interesting. Surely one quick look wouldn't matter. She opened it. Inside was something terrible, a curse or a spirit, or something that immediately attacked her, filling the room with cold or darkness or screaming. Baba Yaga appeared from nowhere, intervened to stop the attack from killing the girl, but refused to help with her original request. You couldn't respect boundaries. You couldn't follow simple instructions. You prioritized curiosity over obedience. "I can't trust you. Leave." The tests were everywhere, layered into everything. Every interaction with Baba Yaga was an evaluation. and she made her decisions quickly. She'd seen enough humans over enough centuries to know what to look for: respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, self-control. If you demonstrated these qualities consistently, she'd help. If you failed any of them significantly, you faced consequences. And those consequences ranged from being sent away empty-handed to being added to the fence as a warning to future visitors. The oven was right there, after all, always heated, always ready, large enough for a person. Baba Yaga had used it before for that purpose. She'd use it again if necessary. Waste not, want not. Your failure could at least provide a meal and contribute a skull to her fence lighting system. Practical and efficient, right until the end. Dual-purpose appliances were big in medieval Russia. Let's examine specific examples from the folklore. Stories where real people or fictional characters, based on real fears and real cultural values, met Baba Yaga and lived to tell about it, or didn't live, which is equally instructive. The most famous story, the one that appears in countless variations across Russia and Eastern Europe, involves a girl named Vasilisa, sometimes called Vasilisa the Beautiful, sometimes Vasilisa the Brave, sometimes just Vasilisa. The title varied. The story remained consistent. Vasilisa was young, kind, hardworking. Her mother had died when she was a child. Before dying, weakened by illness, but clear-minded enough to know what was coming, her mother gave Vasilisa a small wooden doll. Keep this with you always. Feed it when you're hungry. Ask it for help when you're in trouble. Your mother's love and blessing are in this doll. It will protect you. Vasilisa kept the doll. She fed it scraps of food. She spoke to it when she was alone. And the doll, magic or blessed, or simply a focus for a dying mother's love, responded. It moved when no one was watching. It whispered advice. It helped with impossible tasks when Vasilisa was in genuine need. After her mother's death, Vasilisa's father remarried. Classic fairy tale setup. The stepmother was cruel. Not physically abusive, but emotionally cold, manipulative, deliberately making Vasilisa's life difficult. The stepmother had 2 daughters of her own, and they followed her lead. 3 against 1. Vasilisa did all the work, received none of the credit, and absorbed constant criticism and cruelty. The stepfamily wanted her gone. Dead would be ideal, but gone was acceptable, so they created an opportunity. One evening, deliberately, carefully, they let the fire in the house go out, completely, every ember extinguished. The house went dark and cold. In that time, in that place, fire was fundamental to survival. No fire meant no heat during winter, no way to cook food, no light after sunset. You couldn't just relight it with matches or a lighter. Those didn't exist. You needed to get fire from someone else, from a neighbor willing to share, or from somewhere more dangerous if no neighbor would help. The stepmother, feigning distress, announced, "The fire is out. We'll freeze tonight without it. Vasilisa, you're the youngest and strongest. You must go to Baba Yaga and ask her for fire. She lives in the forest. You know the way." Vasilisa did not, in fact, know the way. No one knew the way unless the forest allowed them to find it. But she understood what was happening. This was exile, execution by proxy. Send the girl to Baba Yaga and let the witch do what the step-family couldn't do openly. Vasilisa could have refused. She could have argued, pleaded, suggested alternatives. But she understood her position. She had no power in this house. No allies. If she refused, the step-family would find another way to remove her. At least this way, she had a chance. Small, but real. She took the doll. She wrapped herself in her warmest cloak. She walked into the forest. Evening was falling. The forest would be completely dark within the hour. And she had no light, no fire, because that's what she'd been sent to retrieve. The forest tried to confuse her. Paths twisted. Trees seemed to move. Shadows deepened faster than natural darkness would explain. But whenever Vasilisa felt completely lost, whenever she was about to panic, she'd whisper to the doll hidden in her pocket, and the doll would whisper back, giving directions. Turn left at the fallen oak. Walk toward the sound of water. 300 more steps, then stop. She walked through darkness for hours, or maybe minutes that felt like hours. Time didn't work correctly this deep in the forest, but eventually she saw light ahead. Not firelight from a normal house. Strange light. Pale blue-white light that moved. Multiple points of light arranged in a circle. She walked closer. The fence. Human bones. Glowing skulls. Baba Yaga's fence, exactly as the stories described it. The light came from the skulls, dozens of them, their empty eye sockets blazing with that eerie glow. They lit the clearing, made shadows dance, turned the bones of the fence into a maze of highlights and darkness. Behind the fence, the hut, on chicken legs, currently facing away from her, door toward the forest. She stood at the gate, terrified, but determined. She'd come this far. Turning back meant facing the step-family's disappointment and whatever punishment they'd devise for her failure. Forward meant facing Baba Yaga. Both options were dangerous, but at least moving forward had the potential for success. She called to the hut. Little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me, please." Her voice shook. Fear was obvious, but the words were correct, and the tone, despite the trembling, was respectful. She was asking, not demanding. The hut responded. The chicken legs shifted, talons scraping. The structure groaned and rotated, slowly, until the door faced her. The door opened. No one had opened it from inside. It simply swung inward, revealing darkness, firelight deeper within, and smoke drifting out into the night. Vasilisa approached. The door was low. She had to bow deeply to enter, nearly doubling over. She stepped inside, and the door closed behind her with a thud that sounded far too final. Inside, heat and smoke, and the overwhelming smell of something cooking. The oven dominated the space, radiating heat. And on top of it, stretched out like a cat, was Baba Yaga. Long body, sharp nose, iron teeth catching the firelight, eyes that tracked Vasilisa's every movement from the moment she entered. Baba Yaga spoke first. Her voice was rough, curious, not immediately hostile. "What do you want, girl?" Vasilisa answered honestly, respectfully. "The fire in my house has gone out, grandmother. I've come to ask for fire." Grandmother. That word mattered. It was the proper term of respect in Russian culture for elderly women, even strangers. It acknowledged age, experience, authority. It was polite without being false or flattering, just appropriately respectful. Baba Yaga considered this. Fire is valuable. Why should I give it to you? Vasilisa didn't try to lie or manipulate. "I have nothing to offer except my labor and my respect, grandmother. If you require work in exchange, I'll do whatever you ask." Good answer. Direct, honest, acknowledging the imbalance of power without groveling, offering the only things she actually had, willingness to work and proper behavior. Baba Yaga climbed down from the oven slowly, joints popping. She was even taller than she appeared lying down. She had to hunch to avoid hitting the ceiling. "Very well. You'll stay here. You'll complete the tasks I give you. If you succeed, you'll have your fire. If you fail, I'll eat you." Those are the terms. Simple, clear, no ambiguity about stakes. Vasilisa nodded. "I understand, grandmother." Baba Yaga gave her the first task. Clean the entire hut by morning. Every surface, every corner, every object. It had to be spotless. She'd be back at dawn to inspect. Then Baba Yaga left. She climbed into her mortar, grabbed the pestle, and flew off into the night. The sound of her departure faded. Vasilisa was alone in the hut. She looked around. The place was massive, far larger inside than outside. Every surface was covered in soot, dust, ash. Shelves filled with objects that would need individual attention. The floor was dirt, but filthy dirt. This was impossible for one person in one night. But she'd agreed. She'd made the deal. So she started working. She found a broom, a rag, a bucket. She started at one corner and worked systematically. And as she worked, late into the night, exhausted and beginning to despair, the doll in her pocket came to life. The doll multiplied somehow, or called spirits, or worked magic. Suddenly, there were invisible helpers. Vasilisa could see things moving on their own. Dust disappearing. Objects being cleaned and replaced. The work accelerated, still requiring her effort, but augmented by magic she didn't fully understand. By the time dawn approached, the hut was clean, spotless. Every surface shining as much as old wood and clay could shine. Baba Yaga returned with the sunrise. She flew in on her mortar, landed with a thud outside, and entered. She looked around slowly, checking corners, running a finger along shelves. Finally, she nodded. "You finished. Impressive." "Thank you, grandmother." "How did you do it?" Vasilisa could have lied, could have claimed she was simply very efficient, very hard-working. But she told the truth. "My mother's blessing helps me, grandmother. She left me something before she died, something that aids me when I'm truly in need." Perfect answer. Honest without revealing too much. Acknowledging help without claiming false credit. Humble while being truthful. Baba Yaga was pleased. "You don't lie. You don't boast." "That's rare." "Very well." Second task. The second task was cooking. Prepare a feast by evening. Bread, soup, roasted vegetables. Everything needed for a proper meal. Again, seemingly impossible for one person unfamiliar with the kitchen. Again, Vasilisa worked, and the doll helped. By evening, food was ready, well prepared, properly seasoned. Baba Yaga ate, watching Vasilisa the entire time, making notes, judgments, decisions that wouldn't be explained, but would determine everything. After the meal, Baba Yaga asked personal questions. "Where are you from? Why did your stepfamily send you? Are you afraid? Tell me about your mother." Vasilisa answered every question honestly. She didn't try to make herself sound braver or more important. She admitted her fear. She talked about her mother's death, the stepfamily's cruelty, her own loneliness. She was vulnerable, genuine, open, in a way that most people weren't when facing someone who might eat them. Baba Yaga listened to all of it. Then she made her decision. "You've passed my tests. You're honest, hardworking, humble, and brave despite your fear. You showed respect from the moment you approached my hut. That's rare enough to deserve reward." She walked outside to her fence. She pulled one of the glowing skulls from its post, the light still blazing in its empty sockets. She placed the skull on a stick, creating a makeshift torch. "Take this. The fire inside will never go out. It will light your way home. When you arrive, place the skull somewhere in your house. It will serve you well." Vasilisa took the skull carefully, held it by the stick. "Thank you, grandmother. I'm grateful for your help. You earned it. You didn't receive charity. Remember that." Vasilisa left, walking back through the forest. The skull's light was bright enough to illuminate the path clearly. The forest didn't try to confuse her this time. It let her pass directly, quickly. She walked for what felt like an hour and emerged at the edge of her village right before dawn. She went home. The stepmother and stepsisters were shocked to see her alive. They'd expected her to die in the forest or be eaten by Baba Yaga. They certainly didn't expect her to return carrying fire, but they tried to hide their disappointment. "Oh good, you're back. We'll take that fire now." Vasilisa placed the skull on a table. The light from its eyes intensified, grew hotter. The skull began glowing brighter, radiating not just light, but heat, intention, purpose. The stepmother and stepsisters couldn't look away. The light fixed on them followed them when they tried to move. By morning, they were gone, burned to ash by fire that came from a skull, from Baba Yaga's fence, from justice delivered through magic. The house remained intact. Vasilisa remained unharmed. But the people who'd sent her to die were dead, and their deaths had been poetic, appropriate. Exactly what they'd intended for her turned back on themselves. Karma works fast when managed by forest witches. Baba Yaga had helped her, not out of kindness, exactly. Out of recognition that Vasilisa demonstrated all the qualities Baba Yaga valued. She was respectful, honest, humble, hardworking, brave despite fear. She passed every test. She earned the help, and Baba Yaga gave it plus a little extra. The skull didn't just provide fire. It provided justice. This story establishes the pattern. It shows what success looks like when meeting Baba Yaga. Every interaction respectful, every answer honest, every task completed without complaint, every test passed. And the reward wasn't just solving the immediate problem. It was solving the larger problem, the root cause, the cruelty that created the need for help in the first place. We've seen what success looks like when meeting Baba Yaga. Vasilisa demonstrated respect, honesty, humility, and hard work, and she walked away with her life, with fire and with justice. But not everyone who found the hut on chicken legs had Vasilisa's character or her good sense. Let's look at what happened when people got it wrong. There's a story, told in various forms across Russia and Ukraine, about a merchant. A successful merchant, the kind who'd built wealth through trade, who owned multiple businesses, who was used to getting what he wanted through money or intimidation, or both. This merchant heard rumors, whispers in taverns, stories from travelers. Baba Yaga possessed treasures, magical objects, gold, jewels, items of impossible power hoarded in her hut in the forest. The merchant didn't need these things for survival. He wasn't dying. He wasn't cursed. He wasn't facing impossible odds. He was simply greedy. He wanted more wealth, more power, more magic to give him advantages over competitors. And he was arrogant enough to believe he could outwit an old woman living alone in the woods. How dangerous could one elderly witch actually be? He found the hut after paying a local guide to show him the general direction. The guide refused to go all the way, warning him repeatedly that this was a terrible idea. The merchant ignored the warnings. He had confidence, money, and a plan. He'd offer to buy whatever treasures Baba Yaga had. If she refused, he'd threaten her. If threats didn't work, he'd simply take what he wanted. What was she going to do? She was old, alone, living in a hut in the middle of nowhere. This was probably just another Tuesday for him. Negotiations, threats, acquisitions. Standard business practices in medieval Russia. He stood at the bone fence, looking at the skulls with mild disgust rather than appropriate fear. He called to the hut, but his tone was wrong, impatient, commanding. Turn around. I don't have all day. The hut didn't move. He called again, louder, angrier. I said turn around. Still nothing. The hut remained facing away, chicken legs perfectly still, ignoring him completely. The medieval equivalent of being left on raid. Finally, frustrated, the merchant tried the proper words, the ones his guide had mentioned before fleeing. Little hut, turn your back to the forest and your front to me. But his tone was still wrong, annoyed, resentful that he had to ask rather than command. The hut turned anyway, slowly, maybe out of curiosity. Maybe because the words themselves had power regardless of tone. Maybe because Baba Yaga wanted to see this fool up close before deciding his fate. The merchant approached the door. He saw it was low, and rather than bow, rather than humble himself, he forced himself through, shoulders scraping, head bent but not lowered voluntarily, pushing through with determination, rather than respect. He didn't bow. He squeezed. Inside, Baba Yaga was on her oven, watching him. She said nothing as he entered, just watched, evaluated, let him reveal himself through his own actions. The merchant looked around with obvious disdain. The smoke, the smell, the crude furnishings. He wrinkled his nose. "You live in filth. I expected more from someone with your reputation." First words out of his mouth, and they were an insult. Criticizing her home to her face. Not a great start. Bold strategy for someone standing in a hut made of bones. Baba Yaga remained silent, waiting. The merchant continued. "I've heard you have treasures, magic items, gold. I've come to purchase them. Name your price, and I'll pay it. I'm a generous man. No greeting, no respectful address, no proper request. Just a statement of intent followed by the assumption that everything could be bought." Baba Yaga climbed down from the oven slowly. Her joints creaked. Her height, when fully extended, filled the room. She towered over the merchant, though he seemed not to notice or care. "You want my treasures?" Her voice was neutral, curious almost. "Yes, I have gold. I can pay well. But I'm a busy man, so let's settle this quickly." "I see." Baba Yaga moved toward the oven, running one long-fingered hand along its stone surface. "My most valuable treasures are kept inside the oven, for safekeeping. Reach in and take what you want." The merchant didn't question this. Didn't wonder why anyone would store valuables inside a hot oven. Didn't notice that Baba Yaga had moved behind him, positioning herself between him and the door. He was too focused on the promised treasure, too confident in his own cleverness. Critical thinking was not his strong suit. He approached the oven. It was radiating heat. The opening glowed with embers and flame. But greed overpowered common sense. He leaned forward, reaching inside, hands grasping for gold that must be just past the flames, just a bit deeper. Baba Yaga shoved him, hard, fully, into the oven. Her strength, despite her apparent age and thinness, was enormous. The merchant went in completely. The iron door slammed shut. A heavy bolt slid into place. The merchant screamed, briefly. Then there was only the sound of the fire, louder now, consuming new fuel. Baba Yaga waited. When the screaming stopped, when the fire had done its work, she opened the oven. Bones inside, already charred. She removed them carefully, efficiently. The skull went to join the others on the fence. The larger bones were added to the fence posts where replacements were needed. The smaller fragments were ground into powder for various uses. Nothing wasted. Practical until the end. What did the merchant do wrong? Easier to ask what he did right, because the answer is nothing. He showed no respect from the moment he approached the fence. He forced his way through the door without bowing. He insulted her home immediately. He made demands instead of requests. He called himself generous while demonstrating greed. He thought money entitled him to her help, her treasures, her time. He treated her like a shopkeeper who should be grateful for his business. He basically speedran every possible failure condition. Every single interaction was wrong. Every word, every gesture, every assumption. He demonstrated arrogance, greed, disrespect, and stupidity all at once. Baba Yaga doesn't tolerate any of those qualities individually. Combined in one person, the oven was the appropriate response. The story of the merchant appears in many variations. Sometimes he's a nobleman, sometimes a bandit, sometimes just a greedy peasant who heard rumors and thought he could steal from a witch. The details change. The outcome remains consistent. Greed plus arrogance plus disrespect equals death. The formula is reliable. Another story of failure involves a young woman. Beautiful, vain, obsessed with her appearance and with being admired. She came to Baba Yaga seeking a beauty spell, not because she was ugly. She was already attractive, But she wanted more. She wanted to be the most beautiful woman in her village, her region, perhaps in all of Russia. She wanted all men to desire her, all women to envy her. She wanted beauty that granted power. Moderation was not her strong suit. She found Baba Yaga's hut after considerable difficulty. The forest didn't want to let her through, sensing perhaps that this was not someone who needed help so much as someone who needed a lesson. But persistence counts for something, and she eventually reached the fence. She was dressed impractically for the forest. Fine clothes, embroidered and expensive. Jewelry, her hair arranged elaborately. She looked like she was attending a party, not visiting a witch in the wilderness. The contrast between her appearance and the crude surroundings was stark and deliberate. She wanted everyone, including Baba Yaga, to see that she was better than this place, better than these circumstances. She'd clearly missed the memo about appropriate forest witch meeting attire. She called to the hut with barely concealed impatience. It turned. She approached the door, saw it was low, and made a face. She had to hunch to enter, and doing so messed up her hair, wrinkled her dress. She was annoyed before she even crossed the threshold. Inside, she wrinkled her nose immediately. The smell, the smoke, the crude furnishings, everything offended her sensibilities. And she didn't hide her displeasure. This place is disgusting. How can you live like this? Don't you ever clean? Baba Yaga was sitting near the fire, stirring something in a pot. She looked up slowly. You find my home displeasing? Obviously. It's filthy. The smell alone is unbearable. But I didn't come here for your hospitality. I came for magic. I need a beauty spell, something to enhance my appearance. Make me more beautiful than anyone else. I'll pay you. She pulled out a small purse of coins, holding it as if it was a generous offer rather than an insult. Baba Yaga set down her stirring spoon. Sit. The woman looked around for a chair that met her standards. Finding none, she sat reluctantly on a wooden stool, perched on the edge, as if afraid to fully commit to touching furniture this crude. Baba Yaga offered her tea. A simple clay cup, filled with herbal tea that smelled of forest plants and honey. The woman waved it away without even looking at it closely. No, I don't drink peasant tea. Can we just get to the spell? Baba Yaga's expression didn't change. She set the tea down. You want to be more beautiful? That's why I'm here, obviously. Then look into this. Baba Yaga produced a small mirror from somewhere in her robes. The mirror was tarnished old, its silver backing darkened with age. But the reflection it showed was clear. The woman took the mirror, eager. She looked into it, expecting to see her own beautiful face. Instead, the mirror showed her something else. Her true self. Not her physical appearance, but her spiritual reality. The vanity, the cruelty, the shallowness, the ugliness of character made visible. The mirror reflected what she was beneath the pretty surface. Empty, mean, petty, small. She saw herself as Baba Yaga saw her, as the universe saw her, as she truly was without the cosmetics and clothes and jewelry and carefully maintained facade. She screamed, dropped the mirror, backed away, hands over her face, as if she could unsee what she'd just witnessed. The image stayed in her mind. You can't unsee your own soul once it's been revealed. Customer reviews for this magic mirror would be terrible. Baba Yaga picked up the mirror calmly. You wanted to be more beautiful. I showed you what you lack. Beauty isn't in your face. It's in character. And yours is deeply, fundamentally ugly. The woman fled, ran from the hut, through the forest, not stopping until she reached her village. She was never quite the same after that. The image from the mirror haunted her. Every time she looked at any mirror from that day forward, she saw both reflections, the pretty face and the ugly spirit. She couldn't separate them anymore. She couldn't pretend. Baba Yaga didn't eat her, didn't add her to the fence. This punishment was better. The woman had to live with what she'd seen. had to confront her own ugliness every single day. Death would have been mercy. Self-knowledge was the real curse. What did she do wrong? She insulted Baba Yaga's home. She refused hospitality. She was rude, dismissive, contemptuous. She treated Baba Yaga like a servant, like someone who should be grateful to serve someone as beautiful and important as herself. She valued appearance over substance, surfaces over depth. She came seeking magic to enhance what didn't matter, while ignoring what did. Every interaction revealed character flaws that Baba Yaga couldn't overlook. The punishment fit the crime. She wanted beauty. Baba Yaga showed her what real beauty required and what she lacked. Permanent lesson. Permanent consequence. Now let's look at another success story. This one involves a young man named Ivan. Ivan is a common name in Russian folklore, used generically for peasant heroes. But this particular Ivan story is specific enough to feel real. Ivan was a woodcutter, poor but honest, hardworking but unlucky. He lived in a small village, barely scraping by. One year, his luck got worse. His axe broke. His small field produced almost nothing. His goats died from disease. He fell behind on obligations to the local lord. Winter was coming, and he had nothing. No food stored. No warm clothes. No hope. Desperate, he remembered the stories about Baba Yaga. She could solve impossible problems. If you approached her correctly, if you survived the meeting. Ivan had nothing left to lose. Death from starvation in winter or death from Baba Yaga's oven. Either way, death. At least trying gave him a chance. The risk-reward calculation wasn't complicated. He walked into the forest with no supplies, no gifts, nothing to offer except himself. He found the hut after 2 days of searching, cold and hungry, but determined. He called to the hut respectfully, and it turned. He bowed deeply to enter the low door, humbling himself without resentment. Inside, Baba Yaga was by her fire. She looked at him, noting his worn clothes, his thin frame, his obvious desperation. "What do you want, boy?" Ivan didn't waste time on elaborate stories. "I'm dying, grandmother, slowly, from poverty. I've heard you can solve impossible problems. I don't know what problem to even ask you to solve. I just know I need help. Honest, direct, no manipulation, just desperate truth." Baba Yaga considered this. "You're honest about your situation. That's rare. Most people lie, trying to make themselves sound more deserving. What can you offer in exchange for help?" "Nothing, grandmother. I have nothing. Only my willingness to work. If you have work that needs doing, I'm strong. I'm capable. I can chop wood, build things, dig. Whatever you need." Good answer. Acknowledging he had nothing material, but offering the only thing he did have, labor, Baba Yaga nodded slowly. "I have work. Repair my fence. Some of the posts are rotting. Some of the bones need replacing. Make it sturdy again. Do this properly, and I'll consider your situation." Ivan went outside. The fence was extensive. Many posts. Many crossbars. Some were indeed rotting, bones weakened by weather and time. He worked steadily, carefully. He treated the bones with respect, strange as that felt. These were people once. Failed visitors. He didn't mock them or handle them carelessly. He simply did the work as best he could. It took all day. His hands blistered. His back ached. The work was grim. Handling human bones, replacing skulls that had fallen, ensuring the fence that symbolized failure was structurally sound. But he didn't complain. He didn't rush. He did it properly, even though no one was watching, even though he could have cut corners. Home improvement projects in medieval Russia hit different. When he finished, he went back inside. "The fence is repaired, grandmother." Baba Yaga went outside to inspect. She walked the perimeter slowly, testing posts, checking his work. She found it satisfactory. "You work well. You didn't complain about the nature of the task. You showed respect even to bones. That suggests good character. She went back inside, Ivan following. She pulled items from her shelves. A bag of seeds, a small knife, a cloak. These are for you. Plant these seeds when you return home. They'll grow even in poor soil, even in poor weather. Use this knife for hunting. It never misses, never dulls. Wear this cloak. You won't feel cold while you wear it. These will solve your immediate problems. The rest is up to you. Ivan was stunned. He'd expected maybe one gift, maybe just advice, not multiple magical items. Thank you, grandmother. I don't know how to repay this. You already did. You worked without complaint. You showed respect. You were honest about your situation. That's payment enough. Ivan returned home. The seeds grew impossibly well, providing food through the winter and enough surplus to sell. The knife made him an excellent hunter, bringing in meat and furs. The cloak kept him warm through the coldest nights. Within a year, he'd gone from desperately poor to comfortably stable. Within 2 years, he was prosperous. And years later, when new problems arose, he returned to Baba Yaga's hut. She helped him again because he'd proven himself once. He was respectful the first time, and he remained respectful every time after. Consistency mattered. Baba Yaga remembered. What did Ivan do right? He was honest from the start. No lies, no embellishments. He acknowledged his desperate situation without making excuses. He offered what he could, which was labor. He completed the work without complaints, even though the task was grim and difficult. He treated the bones with respect, showing that he understood they represented people. Failures, yes, but still deserving of basic dignity. He expressed genuine gratitude. Every interaction demonstrated the qualities Baba Yaga valued. The pattern is becoming very clear. Honesty, respect, humility, hard work, appropriate gratitude. These qualities guarantee help. Their absence guarantees punishment. Let's talk about another element of Baba Yaga's tests that appears in many stories. The questions she asks. Not just, what do you want? But deeper questions designed to reveal character. There's a tale about a girl who came seeking advice about marriage. She'd been proposed to by a wealthy man, older, known to be cruel but rich enough to make her family comfortable. Her parents wanted her to accept. She was conflicted. She came to Baba Yaga not for a love spell or manipulation magic, but for wisdom. Baba Yaga listened to her situation, then asked, "What matters more to you, comfort or happiness?" The girl thought carefully. She could have given the answer she thought Baba Yaga wanted to hear, but she answered truthfully. "I don't know, grandmother. I've never had much comfort. I don't know if I'd trade happiness for it or not. I'm afraid I might." Baba Yaga nodded. Honest answer. You don't know yourself yet? That's better than false certainty. She asked another question. If you marry this man and become miserable, will you blame yourself or him? Again, the girl thought. Probably both. Myself for choosing poorly. Him for being cruel. Good. You understand that choices have consequences, and that you share responsibility for your own life. Third question. What would make you happy? The girl struggled with this. I don't know. Not wealth, exactly, but security. Not love, exactly, but respect. I want to be valued, not just as a wife, but as a person. Baba Yaga smiled slightly. Then don't marry the cruel rich man. He'll give you wealth, but no respect. Find someone poor, but decent. Build comfort together. That's my advice. The girl thanked her and left. She declined the wealthy man's proposal. Her family was angry initially, but she eventually married a poor craftsman who treated her well, and they built a good life together through joint effort. Years later, the wealthy man died alone and hated. The girl, now a woman, never regretted her choice. Baba Yaga's questions weren't tests of knowledge. They were tests of self-awareness and honesty. The girl who admitted she didn't know herself was more honest than someone who claimed false certainty. The admission of uncertainty, when genuine, was valuable. Another story involves a boy sent by his father to ask Baba Yaga about the future. The father wanted to know if his business would succeed, if he'd become wealthy, if he'd be important. Baba Yaga let the boy inside. But instead of answering his father's questions, she asked the boy questions. Does your father treat you well? The boy hesitated. This wasn't what he'd come to discuss. But he answered honestly, No, grandmother. He's harsh. Sometimes cruel. He sent me here hoping I'd die, I think. He has other sons he prefers. Why did you come then? I had no choice. He ordered me. I'm his son. I have to obey. Baba Yaga considered this. If I told you your father would fail, lose everything, and die in poverty, what would you do with that information? The boy thought carefully. I'd probably warn him anyway. Even though he's cruel to me, he's still my father. Even though he sent you here to die? Yes, because doing the right thing isn't dependent on whether people deserve it. Baba Yaga was impressed. Good answer. You have integrity. You understand that moral behavior isn't transactional. She gave the boy information, but not what his father wanted. She told him, Your father will fail because he treats people badly. You will succeed because you don't. Leave his house. Make your own way. Don't waste your life serving someone who doesn't value you. The boy returned home. His father was angry that Baba Yaga hadn't answered his questions directly. But the boy took her advice. He left. He built his own life. His father did eventually fail, exactly as Baba Yaga predicted. The boy, now a man, thrived. The questions Baba Yaga asked revealed the boy's character. He was honest about his father's cruelty. He didn't try to hide it or make excuses. He acknowledged the unfairness, but still maintained moral principles. He showed integrity, even when it wasn't rewarded. That impressed Baba Yaga more than blind obedience or family loyalty would have. She adapted her help to fit the person. She didn't give the father what he wanted, because he didn't deserve it. She helped the son instead, because he did. Now let's talk about the cultural context that makes Baba Yaga's tests make sense. Why these specific qualities? Respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear. Why does she value these over other potential virtues like mercy, forgiveness, love? Slavic culture, particularly in rural areas, during the centuries when these stories formed, valued practical virtues over abstract ones. Survival was difficult. Winters were brutal. Famines were common. Village life required cooperation, hard work, and adherence to social rules. People who couldn't or wouldn't follow these principles endangered everyone. Respect mattered because social hierarchy was real and necessary. Respecting elders, respecting authority, respecting those with knowledge or power kept communities stable. Someone who didn't show respect was dangerous, unpredictable, likely to cause conflict. Honesty mattered because lies destroyed trust, and trust was essential for survival. If you couldn't trust your neighbors to honor agreements, to tell the truth about threats, to be reliable in crisis, the whole village structure broke down. Liars were isolated, punished, sometimes exiled. Honesty was practical, not just moral. Humility mattered because arrogance led to mistakes. Someone who thought they knew better than community wisdom, who refused to learn, who couldn't acknowledge their limitations, made errors that affected everyone. Humility meant teachability, adaptability, willingness to accept help. Competence mattered because incompetent people were burdens. If you couldn't do your share of work, others had to compensate. If you couldn't complete necessary tasks, those tasks didn't get done, and everyone suffered. Competence was survival. Appropriate fear mattered because fearlessness was stupidity. The forest was dangerous. Winter was dangerous. Wild animals were dangerous. People who didn't fear real threats died, and sometimes got others killed through reckless behavior. Fear was rational response to real danger. Courage meant acting despite fear, not pretending fear didn't exist. Baba Yaga's tests reflected these cultural values. She rewarded the qualities that made people valuable to their communities and punished the qualities that made them destructive. She was, in a sense, enforcing social order. The threshold between civilization and wilderness was where these rules were tested most stringently. If you couldn't demonstrate these basic virtues in Baba Yaga's presence, you certainly couldn't maintain them in regular life. She also served as a check on other power structures. Kings, nobles, wealthy merchants, they had power in the village world. But in the forest, at the threshold, their power meant nothing. Baba Yaga judged character, not status. A peasant who demonstrated virtue received help. A noble who demonstrated vice received punishment. The forest was where normal hierarchies were suspended, where everyone faced the same test of character. This is why the stories resonated. They offered a fantasy of justice that didn't exist in regular feudal life. The powerful couldn't buy or threaten their way to success with Baba Yaga. They had to actually be decent people. For peasants hearing these stories, that was deeply satisfying. The world might be unfair, but at least in the forest, at least with Baba Yaga, character mattered more than status. Let's examine another type of visitor, those who came not for themselves, but for others. These cases were interesting because they revealed additional layers to Baba Yaga's judgment. There's a story about a mother whose child was sick. Dying, probably. The local healer couldn't help. The priest's prayers accomplished nothing. The mother was desperate. She left the child with neighbors and walked into the forest, seeking Baba Yaga. She found the hut. She called to it respectfully. She entered, bowing. She faced Baba Yaga and stated her need plainly. My child is dying. I need medicine. Something to cure her. Baba Yaga asked, what's wrong with her? The mother explained the symptoms. Fever, weakness, strange marks on the skin. Baba Yaga listened, then asked, how did she get sick? The mother hesitated. The truth was ugly. She stole food from an old woman. The old woman cursed her. She could have lied, could have said it was random illness, bad luck. But she told the truth. Her child had done wrong and faced consequences. Baba Yaga nodded. So your child stole, and now suffers for it. Why should I cure her? The mother answered honestly. She shouldn't be cured because she deserves it. She doesn't. She was wrong to steal. But she's a child. She doesn't understand consequences yet. She needs the chance to learn, to become better. I'm asking for mercy, not justice. Baba Yaga considered this carefully. You admit your child was wrong. You're not making excuses. You understand the difference between mercy and justice. That's wisdom. She prepared medicine, specific herbs mixed in specific proportions. Give her this. It will cure the curse. But tell her why she was sick. Make sure she understands. If she steals again, the curse will return, and I won't cure it twice. The mother took the medicine gratefully. Thank you, grandmother. I'll make sure she learns. She returned home. The medicine worked. The child recovered. And the mother, true to her word, explained everything. The theft, the curse, Baba Yaga's warning. The child learned. Never stole again. The lesson was permanent. What did the mother do right? She was honest about her child's fault. She didn't try to hide it or minimize it. She asked for mercy while acknowledging it wasn't deserved. She demonstrated understanding of moral concepts. Justice, mercy, consequences, learning. Baba Yaga helped not because the child deserved it, but because the mother demonstrated the wisdom to ensure the child would learn from the experience. Contrast this with another story about a father whose son was cursed. The father came to Baba Yaga seeking a cure. When asked what happened, he lied, said his son was cursed randomly, for no reason. Baba Yaga saw through it immediately. You're lying. Tell the truth. The father continued lying. I'm not lying. My son did nothing wrong. Baba Yaga gave him one more chance. Last opportunity. The truth. The father stuck to his story. Protecting his son, he thought. Refusing to admit the boy had done something curse-worthy. Baba Yaga sent him away. I don't help liars. Your son will remain cursed. You chose lies over his life. That's on you. The father left angry, bitter. His son died from the curse, and it was entirely the father's fault. He valued pride, protecting his son's reputation, more than he valued truth. Baba Yaga couldn't work with that, wouldn't work with that. The difference between the two parents was honesty. The mother admitted fault and asked for mercy. The father denied fault and demanded help. One demonstrated character, one demonstrated pride. The outcomes reflected that difference. There are stories of visitors who came to Baba Yaga with strange requests, not for healing or treasure or magic objects, for knowledge, understanding, advice about things that weren't life or death, but still mattered. A young woman came asking how to know if she was in love. Baba Yaga asked her questions. Does thinking of him make you happy or anxious? Do you want to impress him or be yourself with him? Would you care about him if he lost everything? The questions helped the girl understand her own feelings. Baba Yaga didn't give a direct answer. She guided the girl to answer for herself. And then she said, you already know if it's love or infatuation. You just needed permission to trust yourself. A farmer came asking about whether to sell his land. Baba Yaga asked, do you love farming or just tolerate it? What would you do with the money? Can you live with regret if you choose wrong? Again, helping him think through the decision rather than deciding for him. These stories show another side of Baba Yaga. She wasn't just about punishment and trials. She helped people think clearly, confront truths they were avoiding, understand themselves better. She was, in these cases, acting like a wise counselor, not soft or gentle, but honest and direct, asking hard questions that forced self-reflection. The visitors in these stories succeeded by being honest with themselves as much as with her. They didn't have perfect answers. They didn't know themselves completely, but they tried to be truthful, tried to think carefully, didn't dismiss the questions as irrelevant. That honesty, that effort, earned Baba Yaga's help. Let's talk about the physical tasks Baba Yaga assigned in more detail, because the specific nature of these tasks reveals a lot about what she was testing. Cleaning the hut tested multiple things simultaneously. Obviously, it tested work ethic. Would you actually do the boring, difficult labor? But it also tested respect for her space. Did you handle her belongings carefully? Did you clean thoroughly or cut corners? Did you snoop through things that weren't your business? One story describes a girl who, while cleaning, found a locked box. She cleaned around it, didn't touch it, didn't try to open it. When Baba Yaga returned and asked if she'd been curious about the box, the girl answered honestly, "Yes, grandmother. Very curious. But it was locked, and you didn't give me permission to open it." Baba Yaga nodded. "Inside that box is my death. A very specific magical artifact. If you'd opened it, something terrible would have escaped, and we both would have suffered. Your restraint, your respect for boundaries, saved us both." She rewarded the girl not just for cleaning well, but for respecting privacy, for understanding that locked things are locked for reasons, for controlling curiosity when it conflicted with instructions. Another girl, given the same task, opened the box. A curse escaped. Baba Yaga had to use significant power to contain it. The girl wasn't eaten, but she was sent away without help. You prioritized curiosity over obedience. You couldn't respect simple boundaries. I can't trust you with more important things. The task was ostensibly about cleaning. Actually, it was about trustworthiness, impulse control, respect for others' property and privacy. Fetching water with a broken vessel tested problem-solving and persistence. The point wasn't whether you could fetch water. The point was How you responded to discovering the task was harder than it appeared. Did you give up? Did you complain? Did you figure out a solution? Did you come back and honestly admit you couldn't do it? One boy was given a bucket full of holes. He looked at it, looked at the stream he was supposed to fetch water from, and thought. He tried plugging the holes with his fingers. Didn't work. He tried filling it so fast, the water didn't have time to leak. Didn't work. Finally, he realized he could line it with clay from the stream. That worked. He returned with water. Baba Yaga nodded. You didn't give up. You tried multiple solutions. You thought creatively. Good. Another boy, given the same task, tried once, failed, and returned saying it was impossible. Baba Yaga sent him away. You gave up too easily. That tells me who you are under pressure. The task wasn't really about water. It was about character under difficulty. Sorting seeds from dirt tested patience and attention to detail. This was long, boring work. Hours of picking individual seeds out of debris. No shortcuts, no clever solutions. Just patience. Could you maintain focus on tedious work? Could you resist the urge to rush, to do a mediocre job just to finish? Those who took their time, who sorted carefully, who finished with clean piles of seeds and dirt, passed. Those who rushed, who left seeds mixed with dirt because they were tired or bored, failed. The task revealed whether you had patience, whether you could do work that wasn't exciting, whether you took pride in doing things properly. Feeding animals tested how you treated creatures that couldn't reward you or punish you directly. Were you kind to them? Efficient? Did you give them proper food and water? Did you speak gently or harshly? The animals reported back to Baba Yaga. She knew exactly how you'd behaved when you thought no one was watching. One boy was gentle with the horses, speaking softly, brushing them carefully. Later, when he needed to escape from something in the forest, those same horses helped him. They remembered kindness. Another boy was rough, impatient, treating the animals like objects. When he needed help later, they refused. They remembered cruelty. The task tested character in action. How you treat those weaker than you reveals who you are more than how you treat equals or superiors. Now let's talk about what happened to those who tried to cheat, to use magic or trickery against Baba Yaga herself. There's a story about a young sorcerer, trained in some magical tradition, who came to Baba Yaga thinking he could outwit her. He wanted her knowledge, her power, without paying the normal cost of demonstrating character. He thought his magic made him special, exempt from her tests. He approached with confidence, called to the hut, entered without proper respect. When Baba Yaga asked what he wanted, he said, "I want your secrets. The magic you know? Teach me." Baba Yaga looked at him carefully. "Why would I teach you?" "Because I'm talented. I already know magic. I can learn quickly. I'd be a good student. You haven't demonstrated any qualities I value. You've shown arrogance, but not competence. Confidence, but not respect." The sorcerer made a mistake. He tried to use magic to compel her. A binding spell, something to force her cooperation. He spoke the words, made the gestures. The spell launched toward Baba Yaga. She caught it in mid-air, literally reached out and grabbed the spell with one hand, crushing it like paper. "Did you really think you could bind me, boy? Me?" The sorcerer realized his error immediately, tried to flee, but Baba Yaga was faster. She pointed one finger at him, spoke a single word, and he froze, completely immobile. She walked around him, examining him like an interesting insect. "You came to my home. You showed no respect. You tried to attack me with magic. You thought your small power made you my equal." She shook her head. "You misunderstand everything." She transformed him. Different versions of the story describe different transformations. Some say she turned him into a crow, condemned to watch her hut forever. Others say she turned him into a tree, rooted outside her fence. Others say she simply absorbed his magic, taking his power and leaving him ordinary, mundane, powerless. Regardless of the specific punishment, the lesson was clear. You cannot trick Baba Yaga. You cannot force her. You cannot use magic against her. She's older than your magic, more powerful than your spells, and attempting to attack or manipulate her is suicidal. Another story tells of a woman who tried to trick Baba Yaga with a disguise. She pretended to be someone else, someone more deserving, thinking she could lie about her identity and circumstances to gain sympathy and help. Baba Yaga saw through it immediately. You're not who you claim to be. The woman tried to maintain the deception. I am. I swear, Baba Yaga smiled. I see your true face regardless of what mask you wear. You're a liar. And liars get nothing from me. She didn't punish the woman violently. She simply cursed her to always appear as she truly was. Vain, cruel, deceptive. No disguise would ever work again. No makeup, no costume, no magic could hide her true nature. People would always see the ugliness beneath. The woman left, horrified, and the curse followed her for the rest of her life. The attempts to cheat or trick Baba Yaga never worked. She was too old, too experienced, too magically powerful. She'd seen every trick, every deception, every attempt at manipulation. Trying these things didn't just fail. They revealed such profound lack of judgment that they guaranteed punishment. Let's talk about timing. When you met Baba Yaga mattered. Day versus night, season, phase of the moon. These details appear in various stories and seem to affect her mood or willingness to help. Some versions suggest she's more dangerous at night. That darkness belongs to her, and visitors after sunset face greater scrutiny. Others suggest morning is best, catching her after rest, before the day's irritations accumulate. Others say it doesn't matter at all, that she judges character regardless of time. What seems consistent is that you shouldn't waste her time. If you approach her hut and then hesitate, standing at the fence for hours trying to work up courage, she notices. She interprets hesitation as disrespect or indecision. You either commit to seeking her help or you leave. Lingering shows you don't value her time. One story describes a man who stood at the fence for half a day, too scared to call to the hut. Baba Yaga eventually came out, visibly annoyed. If you're not going to ask for help, leave. If you need help, ask. But don't waste my time standing there trembling. The man finally spoke his request. But Baba Yaga was already irritated by his hesitation. She helped him, but grudgingly, with minimum assistance. He survived, but didn't receive the full benefit he might have if he'd approached decisively. Another man approached immediately, called to the hut right away, stated his need clearly as soon as he entered. Baba Yaga appreciated the efficiency. You respect my time. That's good. She helped him fully, generously. The lesson: once you've decided to seek Baba Yaga's help, commit. Don't dither. Don't waste time. Show that you value her attention by using it efficiently. There are stories about people who came to Baba Yaga multiple times. Return visitors. These are interesting because they show how Baba Yaga's judgment evolved based on past behavior. If you'd proven yourself once, demonstrating character and earning her help, she remembered. She might help you again more easily, with less testing. She'd established that you were trustworthy. No need to verify it repeatedly. One man came to her 3 times over his life. First, as a young man seeking advice. He was respectful, honest, followed her guidance. Second time, middle-aged, needing help with a curse. She helped immediately, remembering his previous good behavior. Third time, old, seeking nothing but wanting to thank her for past help. She was touched by this. No one usually thanked her. She gave him a gift, a charm to ease his final years, comfort in old age. His consistency over decades impressed her. He remained respectful, grateful, honest, from youth to old age. That earned her lasting favor. But if you'd failed once, if you'd shown poor character and she'd sent you away, returning was risky. She remembered failures as clearly as successes. One woman came seeking beauty magic, was shown her ugly spirit, and fled. Years later, desperate, she returned seeking actual help with a real problem. Baba Yaga recognized her immediately. You came before. You were vain and rude. Why should I help you now? The woman had changed, genuinely. The experience with the mirror had affected her deeply. She'd spent years becoming a better person. She explained this honestly. I was terrible before, grandmother. I'm ashamed of how I behaved. I've tried to change. I don't know if I've succeeded, but I'm trying. Baba Yaga tested her more stringently than a first-time visitor. Harder tasks, more questions, more scrutiny. But when the woman passed, when she demonstrated that the change was real, Baba Yaga helped. Redemption is possible, but it's hard. You've done the work. I'll help you now. The possibility of redemption existed, but it required genuine change, not just better performance. Baba Yaga could tell the difference between someone who'd learned to fake virtue and someone who'd actually developed it. Let's talk about what Baba Yaga actually did with her time when she wasn't dealing with visitors. Because she didn't just sit in her hut, waiting for desperate people to show up. She had a life, activities, purposes beyond serving as a test for humans. Some stories describe her flying through the forest at night, conducting business no human understood, meeting with spirits, gathering herbs, maintaining the boundary between worlds. She was actively involved in keeping the threshold functioning, keeping the balance between civilization and wild nature. Other stories suggest she guarded specific magical objects or creatures. That part of her role was custodian of dangerous things that couldn't be allowed into the human world without strict control. Some versions describe her as having servants, cats, ravens, sometimes more exotic creatures. They ran errands, gathered information, maintained the hut and grounds. She wasn't entirely alone, though she seemed to prefer solitude most of the time. And she studied. Some stories describe her reading ancient texts, practicing magic, researching secrets that predated human civilization. She was continuously learning, growing in power and knowledge, even after centuries of existence. This context matters because it means visitors were interrupting her. They were asking her to stop whatever she was doing and help them. That's why respect mattered so much. You were asking a powerful being to set aside her own priorities for your benefit. The least you could do was ask politely. Let's examine the specific rewards Baba Yaga gave when she decided to help. They weren't random. They were tailored to the person and situation, often revealing as much about her judgment as the tests themselves. When she gave magical objects, they were appropriate to the recipient's character and needs. To honest people, she gave objects that worked exactly as described. A knife that never dulled, a cloak that provided warmth, seeds that grew despite poor conditions. Simple, useful, reliable. To clever people, she gave objects that required thought to use properly. A mirror that showed truth. A comb that became a forest when thrown. A towel that became a river. Objects that tested judgment even after leaving her hut. To brave people, she gave objects that enhanced their existing courage. A sword that couldn't be broken. Armor that couldn't be pierced. Horse that never tired. Tools that helped them face challenges they were already willing to face. She matched the gift to the person. Someone who demonstrated responsibility received powerful objects. Someone who'd barely passed her tests received weaker assistance. The magnitude of help reflected the magnitude of character demonstrated. And sometimes the gift wasn't an object at all. Sometimes it was information. Directions to find what you sought. Advice about how to solve a problem. Knowledge that would help you help yourself. This was often more valuable than magic items, and she gave it to those who showed wisdom in their questions and answers. One visitor asked for a magic sword to defeat a dragon. Baba Yaga gave him information instead. The dragon is guarding treasure it doesn't need. Offer to share the treasure fairly. The dragon is lonely, not evil. Make a deal. The visitor followed this advice, negotiated with the dragon, succeeded without violence. Better than any sword. The reward reflected what the person actually needed versus what they thought they needed. Baba Yaga's judgment was better than theirs. Accepting what she gave, even if it wasn't exactly what you'd asked for, was part of the test. Now let's talk about the failures in more detail. What happened to people who were sent away without help but weren't eaten? What was their fate? Many simply returned home and faced whatever problem had driven them to seek Baba Yaga in the first place. They'd failed the test. They didn't get help. Their original problem remained unsolved. For many, this meant death from curses, illness, poverty, enemies they couldn't defeat. They'd had one chance, they'd blown it. Consequences followed. Others were cursed. Not killed immediately, but marked in ways that affected the rest of their lives. The vain woman who saw her true ugliness. A liar cursed to have his lies become visible. A thief cursed so everything he stole turned to ash. These curses weren't arbitrary punishment. They were teaching tools, consequences that directly reflected the character flaw that caused the failure. Some were transformed, turned into animals or plants or stones, living but no longer human. These transformations often reflected their crimes. Someone who treated others like objects became an object. Someone who was predatory became a predatory animal. Someone who refused to grow became a tree, capable only of slow growth over centuries. And some, the worst offenders, became part of the fence, their bones added to the structure, their skulls lighting the perimeter, serving Baba Yaga in death as warnings to future visitors. This fate was reserved for those who'd shown not just poor character, but dangerous character, the violent, the deliberately cruel, the irredeemably greedy. They were removed from the world because the world was better without them. The variation in punishment showed that Baba Yaga differentiated between levels of failure. Minor character flaws earned minor punishments. Major flaws earned major consequences. And truly dangerous people were simply eliminated. Justice, as she understood it, was proportional. Let's talk about children who came to Baba Yaga. The stories involving child visitors were different because children weren't held to the same standard as adults. A child sent by a cruel stepmother, like Vasilisa, received more patience, more guidance. Children could be forgiven for fear, for uncertainty, for not fully understanding the rules. Baba Yaga tested them but adjusted difficulty based on age and experience. One story describes a very young boy, maybe 6 years old, who was sent to Baba Yaga by adults who wanted him dead. He arrived terrified, barely able to speak. Baba Yaga could see immediately that this was a child, not a young adult. Her first words were gentler. "Why are you here, little one?" He stammered out his mission, clearly not understanding what was happening. Baba Yaga fed him, let him rest, asked careful questions to understand the situation. When she learned he'd been sent maliciously, she helped him without demanding work or tests. She gave him a magical item to protect him and sent him back safely. Later, she dealt with the adults who'd sent a child to her as a murder weapon. They received no mercy. The story showed that Baba Yaga wasn't cruel for cruelty's sake. She adjusted her standards based on who stood before her. Children were children. They deserved patience. Adults were held to higher standards because they should know better. Teenagers fell somewhere between. Old enough to be tested, but young enough to be forgiven more easily if they failed from ignorance rather than malice. Baba Yaga seemed to evaluate whether someone had the capacity to do better. Children often didn't yet. Teenagers sometimes did, sometimes didn't. Adults definitely did. The differentiation showed sophisticated moral judgment, not blind application of rules. Finally, let's talk about what Baba Yaga represented beyond the literal stories. why she persisted in folklore for centuries, what she meant to the people telling and hearing these tales. Baba Yaga was the ultimate test of character. In regular life, you could fake virtue. You could lie, cheat, manipulate appearances, and possibly get away with it. Human judges could be fooled, but Baba Yaga couldn't be deceived. She saw truth. She judged character, not performance. For peasants living under unfair systems, systems where the powerful could be cruel and face no consequences, Baba Yaga represented justice. She didn't care about your status. Noble or peasant, rich or poor, you faced the same test. Character mattered. Only character. That was powerfully appealing to people who saw the unjust prosper daily. She also represented the necessity of virtue. You couldn't succeed through shortcuts. You had to actually be decent, honest, hard-working, respectful. No amount of cleverness could substitute for character. This reinforced social values, teaching children and reminding adults that virtue was practical, not just moral. And she represented the threshold, the boundary between civilization and wild nature, between human order and natural chaos, between the known and unknown. She guarded this boundary, maintained it, tested those who crossed it. She embodied the idea that certain transitions required proving yourself worthy. The threshold wasn't just geographic. It was psychological, moral, spiritual. Baba Yaga stood at every threshold, every moment where you had to prove who you really were beneath the social performance. She was the test you couldn't fake your way through. This resonated across centuries because everyone faces thresholds, moments where character is tested, where you can't pretend anymore, where what you actually are matters more than what you claim to be. Baba Yaga stories reminded people that those moments were real, important, unavoidable, and that passing them required real virtue, real character, real work. There's another layer to the cultural meaning worth exploring. Baba Yaga as a female power figure in a patriarchal society. In the villages where these stories originated, women's power was largely domestic, limited, controlled by fathers and husbands. But Baba Yaga answered to no one. She lived alone. She commanded magic. She judged men and women equally, and men faced her tests just as women did. Her authority wasn't derived from any male figure. It was intrinsic, absolute, unchallengeable. This made her both terrifying and secretly appealing. For women hearing these stories, Baba Yaga represented a kind of power they'd never personally experienced, but could imagine. Independence, authority, the ability to punish men who deserved it. The stories where arrogant nobles or cruel merchants faced her judgment must have been particularly satisfying. For men, she represented a challenge to their assumed authority. In their world, men made decisions, held power, controlled resources. But Baba Yaga didn't care about gender-based hierarchy. A man's authority in his village meant nothing in her hut. He had to demonstrate character like anyone else. She was a reminder that power had limits, that there were forces that didn't recognize male privilege. The stories taught both genders that virtue transcended social categories. Respectful peasant women received help. Arrogant noble men were eaten. The playing field leveled in Baba Yaga's presence. Character alone mattered. Let's examine how the stories were used in actual village life. They weren't just entertainment. They were teaching tools, moral instruction, social control mechanisms. Parents told Baba Yaga stories to children to teach proper behavior. If you lie, if you're rude, if you disrespect elders, Baba Yaga will know. She sees everything. She judges everyone. The threat wasn't immediate. It was eventual. Someday you might need help. Someday you might face an impossible problem. And your character, developed now through daily choices, would determine whether you received help or punishment. The stories taught that character development was practical, not just moral. You didn't learn virtue for virtue's sake. You learned it because someday it might save your life. The peasant who developed habits of honesty, respect, Hard work, through years of practice, would pass Baba Yaga's tests automatically. The one who'd spent years lying and cheating would fail automatically. Your daily choices shaped your capacity to handle crisis. Elders used the stories to maintain social order. Someone being disrespectful to authority figures? Tell them Baba Yaga stories. Remind them that disrespect has consequences. Someone lying habitually? Baba Yaga stories? Someone refusing to work hard? More Baba Yaga stories. The witch became a tool for reinforcing community values without requiring direct punishment from human authorities. And the stories provided a framework for understanding misfortune. If something terrible happened to someone, if they lost everything or died horribly, people might say, they must have failed Baba Yaga's test. Not literally necessarily, but metaphorically, they demonstrated poor character. They violated the moral code. They faced natural consequences. Baba Yaga stories made sense of suffering by connecting it to behavior. This wasn't always fair. Sometimes good people suffered through no fault of their own. But the stories provided a narrative framework that made suffering feel less random, more comprehensible, connected to human agency and moral choice. Let's talk about regional variations in Baba Yaga stories, because she appeared across a vast geographic area, and local cultures adapted her to their specific needs and values. In Russian versions, she's often singular, living deep in the forest, testing heroes on epic quests. The emphasis is on individual character proving itself through trials, very much in line with the hero journey structure common in Russian folklore. In Ukrainian versions, she sometimes appears in threes. 3 Baba Yaga sisters, each guarding a different part of the forest, each with slightly different personalities and standards. Visitors might have to pass all 3 to receive help. This reflects Ukrainian emphasis on community and collective judgment. Not one authority figure, but multiple perspectives. In Polish versions, she's sometimes more explicitly dangerous, less likely to help, more likely to eat visitors regardless of their character. The threshold between helpful and harmful is thinner. This might reflect Poland's more traumatic historical experiences, more suspicion of power, less faith in fair judgment. Poland had reasons to be cynical about fairness. In some regions, she's connected to Slavic pre-Christian deities, possibly a remnant of an ancient goddess figure, degraded by Christian influence into a witch, but retaining elements of divine judgment. In these versions, she's older than Christianity, her authority predating the church, her magic connected to nature rather than demons. Other regions connect her to winter, to death, to the season when the world dies and might not return. She becomes associated with the longest nights, the coldest months, the time when survival is most difficult. Her tests reflect winter's tests. Can you endure? Can you persist? Can you maintain virtue when everything is hard and dark? The variations show that Baba Yaga was adaptable, flexible, capable of representing different things to different communities while maintaining core elements. The hut on chicken legs, the bone fence, the tests of character. These remained consistent, but the specific details, the emphasis, the likelihood of help versus punishment, these shifted based on local needs and fears. Now let's talk about how Baba Yaga stories evolved over time, particularly as Russia modernized, as literacy spread, as the old village world slowly transformed. In early versions, collected from oral tradition, Baba Yaga is genuinely frightening. Ambiguous, yes, but primarily dangerous. The emphasis is on survival, on passing her tests to avoid death. Help is possible, but not guaranteed. The stakes are life or death, literally. Later versions, particularly those written down in the 19th century during the Russian folklore collection movement, begin emphasizing her wisdom more. She becomes less randomly dangerous, more consistently fair. The tests become clearer, the rules more explicit. She transforms from chaotic force to stern but fair judge. This reflects the collector's own values, their desire to find moral lessons in folklore, their need to make the stories serve educational purposes. 19th century academics loved tidying up chaos into lessons. By the 20th century, especially in Soviet times, some versions try to rationalize her. She's explained as a hermit, or a particularly strict teacher, or a woman traumatized by past events who tests visitors because she's been hurt before. The supernatural elements are downplayed, the psychological elements emphasized. She becomes more human, less magical, fitting Soviet materialism and skepticism towards superstition. Post-Soviet versions and contemporary retellings often make her more sympathetic. They explore her loneliness, her motivations, her own backstory. Why does she live alone? What made her this way? Modern audiences want complex characters with understandable motivations. They're less comfortable with purely archetypal figures who simply exist to test and judge. But something is lost in these rationalizations and humanizations. The power of Baba Yaga originally came from her opacity, her refusal to be fully understood, her existence as a force rather than a person. She didn't need a backstory. She didn't need justification. She simply was. That pure archetypal quality made her powerful, frightening, and ultimately useful as a teaching figure. Modern versions that try to explain her, sympathize with her, understand her psychologically, they diminish her power. She becomes just another character rather than a fundamental principle. The threshold she guarded, the absolute judgment she rendered, the unavoidable test she represented. These concepts work better when she remains mysterious, incomprehensible, ancient, beyond human understanding. Let's examine specific examples of how Baba Yaga appeared in related folklore, in stories that weren't primarily about her, but where she played a supporting role. In the tale of Vasilisa the Wise, different from Vasilisa the Beautiful, Baba Yaga appears as a source of magical knowledge. Vasilisa needs to learn certain spells to defeat an enemy. She goes to Baba Yaga, passes her tests, and receives instruction. But the instruction isn't gentle. Baba Yaga doesn't coddle students. She teaches through harsh lessons, through difficult assignments, through tests that feel cruel, but produce genuine learning. Vasilisa emerges more powerful, but also humbled by the experience. She learned not just magic, but respect for magic, understanding of the costs, awareness of her own limitations. In Tales of Ivan the Fool, who succeeds through innocence and luck rather than cleverness or virtue, Baba Yaga sometimes appears as an obstacle he bypasses through sheer blessed obliviousness. He doesn't understand she's dangerous. He treats her like a normal grandmother, with simple kindness and no fear. This confuses her enough that she helps him without demanding usual tests. The stories suggest that sometimes innocence achieves what calculation cannot, though whether Ivan actually passed her tests or simply short-circuited them through genuine guilelessness remains ambiguous. In stories about Koschei the Deathless, an evil sorcerer whose death is hidden away, Baba Yaga sometimes provides crucial information about where Koschei's death is located. Heroes who treat her respectfully receive this information. Heroes who try to force or trick her die. She doesn't care whether Koschei lives or dies. She cares about the character of those asking questions. This establishes her as neutral arbiter, not aligned with good or evil, but with proper behavior. These supporting roles show that Baba Yaga existed as part of a larger mythological ecosystem. She wasn't just the subject of her own stories. She appeared throughout folklore as a consistent element, a reliable test of character, a source of dangerous knowledge, a threshold guardian encountered during larger adventures. Let's talk about the physical dangers of visiting Baba Yaga beyond the tests themselves. The journey through the forest killed some visitors before they ever reached her hut. The forest was genuinely dangerous. Wild animals, wolves, bears, boars. These killed travelers regularly in actual history, not just stories. Someone walking alone through wilderness for days faced real predator threats. Weather was another killer. Getting caught in a storm without shelter. Exposure to cold. summer heat, and dehydration. The forest provided no protection, no aid. You survived on your own skills, or you didn't survive. Getting lost was perhaps the most common way to die. The forest confused people. Paths vanished. Landmarks moved or were never reliable to begin with. People walked in circles until exhaustion, hunger, or thirst killed them. Their bones were found months or years later, if found at all. The forest kept its dead. And then there were the other inhabitants. The stories mention other creatures besides Baba Yaga: forest spirits, Rizalki, water spirits who drowned people, Leshy, forest guardians who led travelers astray, the Vila, nature spirits, beautiful and dangerous. These weren't just story elements. People genuinely believed in them, feared them, took precautions against them. The forest was full of dangers beyond the physical. So reaching Baba Yaga's hut alive meant you'd already passed multiple tests. The forest's test of persistence, courage, survival skill, luck. You'd proven you could navigate genuine danger. This probably affected how Baba Yaga evaluated you. Someone who made it all the way had already demonstrated certain qualities just by arriving. Those who died in the forest never appear in the stories. We only hear about successful arrivals. This creates survivorship bias. Every visitor we hear about was capable enough to reach her. The incompetent died before meeting her. The truly fearful turned back. The unlucky died to predators, weather, or spirits. Baba Yaga only met a pre-filtered group, those brave, capable, or desperate enough to survive the journey. This makes her tests even more stringent. She wasn't evaluating the general population. She was evaluating survivors, people who'd already proven basic competence. And many of these survivors still failed her tests of character. That's how high her standards were. Let's examine the role of magic in Baba Yaga stories more closely. Magic in these tales isn't flashy or spectacular in the way modern fantasy depicts it. It's subtle, everyday, practical. Baba Yaga's magic manifests in the walking hut, the flying mortar, the glowing skulls, but also in smaller ways. Knowing when visitors approach before seeing them. Seeing through lies. Tasks that complete themselves when the right person attempts them. Objects that work exactly as needed. Her magic is functional, purposeful, connected to her role rather than displayed for show. Visitors who bring magic items rarely succeed through them. The magic doll Veselisa carried helped, but her own character still mattered most. The doll multiplied her effort, but didn't replace it. Magic in these stories augments virtue, but doesn't substitute for it. This reflects a worldview where magic is real, but not supreme. Character matters more than power. A magical sword won't help if you're too cowardly to fight, or too arrogant to use it properly. Magic items are tools. Like any tool, their value depends on the user's skill and character. Baba Yaga herself, despite enormous magical power, still follows rules. She doesn't simply kill everyone who annoys her. She tests them first. She follows her own code. Her power is limited by her principles. This is important. Even absolute power voluntarily constrains itself to maintain order. The strongest are most obligated to follow rules, not least obligated. Finally, let's talk about what happened in the rare cases where someone tried to help Baba Yaga. Most stories focus on people seeking help from her, but a few tales describe visitors who came offering help, seeing a need, trying to assist an old woman living alone. One story describes a young woman who found Baba Yaga's hut by accident, not seeking her, just lost in the forest. Baba Yaga was outside, struggling to repair part of her hut. The chicken legs had grown weak with age. Even they aged, apparently. The woman didn't recognize Baba Yaga, saw only an old woman who needed help, offered to assist with repairs. Baba Yaga, surprised, accepted. They worked together. The woman was skilled, efficient, respectful. When the work finished, she realized who this old woman was. Fear struck her. But Baba Yaga smiled. You helped without knowing who I was. You saw someone in need and assisted. That's rarer than you'd think. Most people help only when they expect reward. She gave the woman directions out of the forest and a small gift. A seed that would grow into a tree bearing magical fruit. The woman planted it, and it sustained her family for generations. The story taught that virtue demonstrated toward those who can't reward you is the most genuine virtue. Helping Baba Yaga when you thought she was just a powerless old woman revealed true character. You weren't performing for benefit. You were simply being decent. Another tale describes a hunter who saw Baba Yaga's chicken leg hut being attacked by a pack of wolves. He didn't know whose hut it was. He saw the hut's legs struggling against the pack and intervened, drove the wolves away, saved the hut. Baba Yaga emerged, grateful. You helped when you had no obligation, when you thought you'd receive nothing for it. That's worthy of reward. She gave him the ability to understand animal speech. This made him the greatest hunter in the region, able to anticipate animal behavior perfectly. These stories established that Baba Yaga responded to genuine altruism, helping her without knowing who she was, without expecting reward, demonstrated character she respected. She rewarded this even more generously than she rewarded those who passed her tests while seeking benefits. The lesson: the highest virtue is helping when no one is watching, when no reward is expected, when you'll receive no credit. Baba Yaga sees these actions. She judges them most favorably. Character demonstrated in private, without audience, without motive beyond decency. That's the gold standard. We've explored Baba Yaga's world, her tests, her methods, and the fates of countless visitors who found their way to her hut on chicken legs. We've seen successes and failures, virtues rewarded and vices punished. Now let's answer the central question directly. Why did Baba Yaga help some visitors and eat others? What was the pattern? What determined your fate when you stepped into that hut and faced an ancient witch with iron teeth? The answer, after examining dozens of stories across centuries of folklore, is remarkably consistent. Baba Yaga helped those who demonstrated 6 specific qualities: respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, and understanding of reciprocity. She punished those who failed to demonstrate these qualities, with severity proportional to how badly they failed and how dangerous their character defects were. This wasn't arbitrary. It wasn't mood-dependent. It wasn't about whether she liked you personally or found you charming. Baba Yaga operated by principles, and those principles were absolute. If you demonstrated the qualities she valued, she helped, regardless of who you were or where you came from. If you failed to demonstrate them, you faced consequences, again regardless of status or circumstance. Let's break down each quality and why it mattered so fundamentally to her judgment. Respect was first and most essential because it demonstrated understanding. When you showed respect to Baba Yaga, you acknowledged reality. You were in her home, in her domain, seeking her help. She held all the power. You needed her more than she needed you. Respect meant you understood this power dynamic and accepted it without resentment. Disrespect indicated dangerous ignorance. Someone who couldn't recognize power imbalances, who couldn't adjust their behavior based on context, who thought their normal social status applied everywhere. That person was fundamentally disconnected from reality. They'd make mistakes. They'd misjudge situations. They'd endanger themselves and potentially others through sheer inability to read circumstances accurately. Baba Yaga had no patience for people who couldn't recognize when they were outmatched. Arrogance wasn't just annoying to her. It was evidence of poor judgment, and poor judgment was deadly in the world she inhabited. The threshold between civilization and wilderness required acute awareness of danger. Arrogant people lacked this awareness. They didn't belong in her domain. They certainly didn't deserve her help. So respect filtered out the dangerously stupid immediately. Before any other test, before questions or tasks, Respect was the entry requirement. Fail this, and nothing else mattered. Honesty came second, because lies destroyed the foundation of any interaction. Baba Yaga needed accurate information to help people effectively. If you lied about your situation, your needs, your capabilities, she couldn't judge what help was appropriate. Liars forced her to waste time extracting truth, or simply made accurate help impossible. But more fundamentally, lying revealed character defects that went beyond the immediate interaction. Someone who lied to her face was someone who lied generally. Someone who tried to manipulate her was someone who manipulated everyone. Someone who couldn't be trusted to tell the truth in high-stakes situations couldn't be trusted at all. And Baba Yaga's help often involved powerful magic, dangerous knowledge, objects that could cause harm if misused. She couldn't give these things to people she couldn't trust. A liar who received magical assistance might use it for evil purposes, might hurt innocents, might destabilize the balance Baba Yaga was supposed to maintain. Honesty was her protection against empowering the wrong people. The stories consistently show that attempting to lie to Baba Yaga failed immediately. She saw through deception instantly. This wasn't just because she was magical, though that helped. It was because she'd seen every type of lie, heard every manipulation, witnessed every form of deception over centuries. Humans couldn't invent new ways to lie that she hadn't already encountered thousands of times. She had centuries of experience detecting bullshit. So honesty was both practical and moral. Practically, it enabled effective help. Morally, it demonstrated trustworthiness. Liars failed both tests simultaneously. Humility was the third essential quality because it indicated teachability and self-awareness. Humble people knew their limitations. They understood they didn't have all the answers, which is why they were seeking help in the first place. They could accept guidance, follow instructions, learn from experience. Arrogant people thought they already knew everything. They came to Baba Yaga not to learn, but to acquire tools for plans they'd already formed. They wanted her to serve their purposes, not to guide them toward better purposes. This made them unteachable, and unteachable people couldn't be helped effectively. Humility also prevented entitlement. Humble people asked for help, understanding they might not receive it. They acknowledged that Baba Yaga had no obligation to assist them. They were grateful when help came, rather than treating it as their due. Entitled people demanded help, grew angry when it was withheld, accused Baba Yaga of being unfair or cruel for not immediately solving their problems. This revealed fundamental misunderstanding of how the world worked. No one owed you anything. Help was a gift, not a right. Entitled people couldn't grasp this, which made them poor recipients of assistance. Also made them excellent candidates for the oven. The stories show humble people succeeding, even when they had little else to offer. Poor peasants with nothing but willingness to work. Children who admitted their fear and confusion. People who acknowledged their own faults and failings. Humility compensated for many other deficiencies. It couldn't compensate for dishonesty or disrespect, but it helped significantly. Arrogance, conversely, couldn't be compensated for by anything. Rich merchants with gold, powerful nobles with authority, clever sorcerers with magic, all failed if they approached Baba Yaga arrogantly. No amount of other resources mattered if you lacked humility. Competence was the fourth quality, and it worked differently from the others. Baba Yaga didn't require perfection or exceptional skill. She required effort, persistence, and the ability to complete tasks to reasonable standards when given clear instructions. Competent people worked steadily, focused on objectives, solved problems when possible, and honestly admitted when problems exceeded their capabilities. They didn't give up at first difficulty. They didn't blame others when things went wrong. They took responsibility for their portion of any task and did it as well as they could. Incompetent people quit easily, made excuses constantly, blamed circumstances or others for their failures, and couldn't maintain focus on objectives. These traits indicated poor character as much as poor skill. Incompetence wasn't just about lacking abilities. It was about lacking persistence, responsibility, and work ethic. Baba Yaga's tasks specifically tested this. The tasks themselves were often impossible in strict literal terms. Clean an enormous hut in one night, fetch water in a broken vessel, sort millions of seeds from dirt. No normal human could complete these through ordinary effort alone. But the tasks weren't really about completion. They were about approach. Did you start working immediately or complain about unfairness? Did you persist even when success seemed impossible? Did you try multiple solutions when the first one failed? Did you maintain effort until explicitly told to stop? Those who approached tasks correctly often received magical assistance. But the assistance only came after they demonstrated willingness to work. The magic rewarded character, not replaced it. Competent people earned help through their approach. Incompetent people failed before magic had reason to intervene. Appropriate fear was the fifth quality, and it might seem contradictory. Why would Baba Yaga reward fear? Wasn't courage more valuable? But Baba Yaga valued appropriate fear because it indicated accurate risk assessment. Her domain was genuinely dangerous. She herself was genuinely dangerous. The situation facing her was high stakes. Fear was the rational response to real danger. People who weren't afraid were either too stupid to recognize danger or too arrogant to take it seriously. Either way, fearlessness indicated poor judgment. These people made mistakes, took unnecessary risks, endangered themselves and others through reckless behavior. But fear alone wasn't enough. Paralyzing fear, fear that prevented action, fear that made you freeze or flee, that failed too. Baba Yaga respected fear that was controlled, managed, pushed through. Courage wasn't the absence of fear. It was action despite fear. The stories showed children trembling with terror while completing tasks, and Baba Yaga praising them for continuing despite fear. She saw their shaking hands, heard their wavering voices, noted their obvious terror. And she respected that they functioned anyway, that they didn't let fear prevent them from doing what needed doing. This distinguished genuine bravery from foolish recklessness. The person who wasn't afraid didn't understand the situation. The person who was terrified but acted anyway had both accurate perception and strength of will. That combination was valuable, worth rewarding. Understanding reciprocity was the sixth and final core quality. This meant grasping that help wasn't free, that magic had costs, that receiving required giving. Not necessarily material payment, though offerings helped. But at minimum, offering respect, effort, and appropriate behavior in exchange for assistance. People who understood reciprocity came to Baba Yaga prepared to work, to trade, to earn what they received. They didn't demand, they didn't assume their need entitled them to help. They offered what they could: labor, information, gratitude, acknowledgement of debt. They understood that transactions required both parties to give. People who didn't understand reciprocity thought need alone justified taking. They demanded help, grew angry when asked to work first, felt entitled to magic because their situation was desperate. This revealed fundamental misunderstanding of how relationships worked, how obligations formed, how exchanges functioned. Baba Yaga punished this harshly because entitled people were dangerous. If they believed need justified taking, they'd take from anyone, not just her. They'd steal, rob, harm others while justifying it through their own desperation. She couldn't empower such people, couldn't reward such thinking. Those who understood reciprocity maintained social fabric. They respected others' boundaries. They honored obligations. They built relationships based on fair exchange rather than exploitation. These were people worth helping because helping them strengthened communities, maintained order, reinforced proper behavior. So those were the 6 qualities: respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, understanding of reciprocity. Demonstrate all 6, you received help. Fail anyone significantly, you faced consequences. Fail multiple, consequences intensified. Fail all six, as the arrogant merchant did, death was the likely outcome. He achieved 100% failure completion. But there's a deeper pattern beneath these six qualities. They all relate to a single core concept: accurate perception of reality, coupled with moral behavior within that reality. Respect meant perceiving power dynamics accurately. Honesty meant perceiving and communicating truth. Humility meant perceiving your own limitations. Competence meant perceiving what tasks required. Appropriate fear meant perceiving danger. Reciprocity meant perceiving obligations. Baba Yaga was testing whether you saw reality clearly and behaved morally within it. People who perceived reality accurately but behaved immorally, clever liars, competent thieves, failed. People who meant well but couldn't perceive reality accurately, entitled helpers, foolish brave people, also failed. You needed both: accurate perception and moral behavior. This is why her tests were so consistent. She wasn't testing for specific skills or knowledge. She was testing for fundamental character traits that enabled functioning effectively and morally in difficult circumstances. These traits predicted success, not just in her domain, but in life generally. A person who demonstrated these six qualities to Baba Yaga would demonstrate them elsewhere. They'd be good community members, reliable workers, trustworthy friends, helping them created positive ripples. They'd use her assistance well, help others in turn, strengthen the social fabric. A person who failed these tests with Baba Yaga was likely failing them elsewhere too. They were probably bad community members, unreliable, untrustworthy. Helping them might enable harm. They might use magical assistance for destructive purposes. Better to refuse help or remove them entirely than empower their dysfunction. So Baba Yaga wasn't just judging individuals. She was performing social quality control, helping those who deserved help, punishing or removing those who didn't, maintaining standards that kept her assistants from empowering evil or stupidity. Medieval HR, basically, except the termination process was more literal. This is why she remained so consistent across centuries of stories. The character traits she valued were genuinely valuable. The traits she punished were genuinely harmful. She wasn't enforcing arbitrary rules. She was enforcing principles that made communities function, that made individuals successful, that separated those worth helping from those who'd misuse help. Now let's talk about edge cases, situations where the pattern was less clear or where Baba Yaga made surprising decisions that revealed additional dimensions to her judgment. There were stories where someone demonstrated mixed character, some good qualities and some bad ones. How did she judge these cases? Generally, she evaluated the overall balance. One significant virtue could compensate for minor flaws, but significant flaws couldn't be compensated by minor virtues. The threshold for acceptable character was relatively high, though not impossibly so. There's a story about a man who was honest and hardworking, but also quite arrogant about his abilities. He came to Baba Yaga, treated her respectfully, which his arrogance didn't extend to elders. Fortunately for him, stated his need honestly, and worked hard on assigned tasks. But he also bragged constantly about his skills, implied he was better than others who'd come before him, showed little humility. Baba Yaga helped him, but minimally. She gave him exactly what he asked for, and nothing extra. No bonus gifts, no additional advice, no warmth in the interaction. She said explicitly, "You earned help through your respect, honesty, and hard work. But your arrogance limits how much I'm willing to give you. Take what you need and learn humility elsewhere." He survived, got his problem solved, but missed out on potential additional benefits his character defect cost him. Partial virtue earned partial reward. The character assessment was basically pass-fail with partial credit available. Conversely, there was a story about a very humble, very honest person who was also quite incompetent. They tried hard, but simply couldn't complete tasks well. Baba Yaga saw the effort, the good intentions, the strong character. She helped anyway, but adapted her help to account for their limitations. Instead of giving them a task requiring skill, she gave them something that would work despite incompetence. A magical object that required no skill to use. Or advice so clear, even someone clumsy could follow it. She didn't punish incompetence when it was paired with good character. She worked around it. But incompetence alone, or paired with bad character, earned no such accommodation. This showed sophisticated moral judgment. She wasn't applying rigid rules mechanically. She was evaluating whole people, considering contexts, adapting responses to individual circumstances, while maintaining core principles. There were also stories where Baba Yaga chose not to help, even when someone passed her tests. These were rare but important. They established that she had legitimate reasons to refuse assistance beyond character judgment. One story describes a man who came seeking help, killing his brother over an inheritance dispute. He was respectful, honest about his intentions, humble enough, competent, appropriately fearful. He passed all tests. But Baba Yaga refused to help. "Your character is acceptable," she told him, "but your goal is not. I don't help fratricide. Solve your inheritance dispute without murder." She could have helped him kill his brother. She had the power. He demonstrated the character traits she normally rewarded. But the intended use of her help was immoral, and she refused to enable it. Character qualified you for help, but purpose determined whether you actually received it. Another story involves a woman seeking love magic to make someone fall in love with her against their will. Again, the woman passed Baba Yaga's character tests, but Baba Yaga refused. "Love magic that violates will is evil. I won't provide it. If you want love, earn it honestly." The pattern was clear. Baba Yaga helped moral purposes. She refused immoral ones, even when requested by people of good character. She didn't empower evil, even when evil was sought by otherwise decent people having temporary moral failures. This added another layer to her judgment. Not just "who are you?" but "what will you do with my help?" Both questions mattered. Both had to have acceptable answers. Let's talk about what happened to Baba Yaga's gifts over time. Did magical objects continue working forever? Could they be passed down? What were the long-term consequences of receiving her help? Most stories suggest magical gifts worked indefinitely if used properly and morally. The knife that never dulled remained sharp. The cloak that provided warmth continued warming. Seeds that grew in poor soil kept producing. As long as the recipient maintained good character and used gifts appropriately, magic persisted. But if character degraded, if the recipient became arrogant or cruel or dishonest, gifts often stopped working or turned against their owner. A magical sword that couldn't be broken might shatter when swung by someone who'd become dishonorable. Seeds that grew effortlessly might wither if planted by hands that had turned greedy. This wasn't punishment exactly. More like gifts recognizing they'd been given to someone who no longer deserved them. The magic was tied to character at the moment of gifting. Significant character change could break that connection. Some gifts could be passed down to worthy descendants. A magical item given to a good person might work for their children if those children also demonstrated good character. But it wouldn't work for unworthy descendants. The magic tested each new generation the same way Baba Yaga tested original recipients. This meant Baba Yaga's influence extended far beyond initial encounters. Families generations removed from the original meeting might still be using her gifts, or might have lost them through character decay. She affected bloodlines, not just individuals. There were also stories where people tried to sell or trade gifts from Baba Yaga. This usually ended badly. Gifts couldn't be transferred through commerce. They were personal, tied to specific recipients. Attempting to sell them either resulted in magic ceasing to function or in curses falling on both seller and buyer. The lesson was clear. Gifts from Baba Yaga were rewards for character, not commodities. They couldn't be divorced from their moral context. They worked for those who earned them, and only for those who maintained the character that earned them initially. The magic items themselves revealed Baba Yaga's understanding of what people actually needed versus what they thought they needed. Seeds that grew in any soil provided self-sufficiency, freedom from dependency on luck, or nobles' generosity. Cloaks that provided warmth offered security against harsh world. Knives that never dulled represented competence that couldn't be degraded. Each gift addressed specific vulnerability while requiring continued virtue to function. This made Baba Yaga's gifts different from fairy godmother gifts in Western tales. Those often worked regardless of recipient's character, could be misused, created dependency. Baba Yaga's gifts required continued virtue, encouraged self-improvement, maintained connection between character and reward. The magic enforced ongoing good behavior. Now let's examine stories where Baba Yaga herself needed help. Yes, a few tales exist where even she faced problems requiring assistance. These stories reveal additional dimensions to her character and teach lessons about power, vulnerability, and consistent virtue. One tale describes a curse placed on Baba Yaga by a powerful sorcerer she'd wronged somehow. The curse limited her magic, weakened her, threatened to bind her completely. She needed a specific herb that grew only in distant, dangerous territory she couldn't reach while cursed. A young woman arrived seeking help around this time. Baba Yaga, weakened but still formidable, tested her as always. The woman passed perfectly, demonstrated every quality Baba Yaga valued. When asked what she needed, the woman explained her problem, a minor issue compared to what Baba Yaga usually handled. Baba Yaga sat silently for a long moment, then said, "I can solve your problem easily, but I need help myself. I'm cursed. I need this herb." She described it, its location, the dangers involved. "Retrieve it for me, and I'll help you. I'll also owe you debt, which is a valuable thing to have." The woman could have refused, could have said this wasn't part of the deal, that she'd passed tests and deserved help without additional requirements. But she didn't. She recognized that even Baba Yaga, powerful as she was, faced difficulties. And she just asked for help the same way the woman had, honestly, directly. Acknowledging need, the woman went, retrieved the herb through considerable difficulty and danger, returned, gave it to Baba Yaga, who used it to break the curse. Baba Yaga kept her word, solved the woman's original problem generously, then added, "You helped me when I was vulnerable. Most people would have exploited that or refused, thinking I deserved suffering. You showed the same character when helping me that you showed when asking help. That's consistency. That's integrity." She gave the woman additional gift, a token that would let her call on Baba Yaga once in future, guaranteed help for any need. The woman never used it. Just knowing she had it was enough. But the story showed that Baba Yaga valued those who maintained virtue even when circumstances reversed power dynamics. Another tale describes Baba Yaga's hut becoming too old, the chicken legs failing. She needed specific rare wood to repair it, but that wood grew in territory another powerful being controlled. She couldn't simply take it without permission, as that would violate agreements maintaining balance between hours. A man arrived seeking help while she was dealing with this. He passed her tests. When she explained her situation, he had skills in diplomacy, negotiation, offered to negotiate with the powerful being on her behalf. He succeeded, secured the wood through clever argumentation and respectful negotiation, brought it back, helped repair the hut's legs himself, as he had carpentry skills. Baba Yaga was impressed not just by his help, but by how he helped. He didn't treat her need as bargaining leverage. He didn't demand extra payment for additional service. He simply solved the problem he'd agreed to solve, completely and competently. She helped him extravagantly in return, solved not just his immediate problem, but several underlying issues he'd mentioned that contributed to it, gave him magical assistance that would help for years, and marked him as under her protection, which prevented other dangerous beings from harming him. These stories where Baba Yaga needed help taught several things. First, even the powerful face problems. Even those who seem invincible have vulnerabilities and limitations. Power is never absolute. Second, how you treat the powerful when they're vulnerable reveals character more than how you treat them when they're strong. It's easy to be respectful when someone can destroy you. Harder to maintain that respect when they're weakened and you could exploit them. Third, helping those who've helped others creates positive cycles. Baba Yaga spent centuries helping those who demonstrated virtue. When she needed help, those principles came back. The woman who helped her had learned proper behavior partly from stories about Baba Yaga. She was applying Baba Yaga's own standards back to her. The stories also humanized Baba Yaga slightly without diminishing her. She remained powerful, frightening, absolute in her domain, but she wasn't infinitely powerful. She had needs, limitations, moments of vulnerability. This made her more real, more complete, more interesting. Let's talk about group dynamics when multiple people visited Baba Yaga together. These stories revealed how she judged not just individual character, but how people treated companions and whether they enabled good or evil in others. One tale describes two brothers seeking help. Both needed to pass tests. Baba Yaga tested them separately, giving each different tasks. Elder brother completed his task competently, but without helping younger brother when he struggled. Younger brother worked hard on his own task, but also assisted elder when opportunities arose. Baba Yaga judged them accordingly. Elder brother received help but minimal assistance, because his character was acceptable but not exceptional. Younger brother received generous help because he demonstrated compassion and cooperation beyond self-interest. The story taught that being tested with others reveals additional character dimensions. How do you treat companions? Do you help or ignore them? Do you see others' struggles as opportunities to demonstrate superiority or as calls for assistance? Another tale describes three sisters seeking help. Baba Yaga gave them single tasks requiring cooperation. Two sisters worked together well. Third sister tried to complete entire task herself, claiming credit, excluding others. Baba Yaga helped the two cooperative sisters, sent the third away. You can't work with others. You must dominate or control. That's character flaw that will harm you and those around you. Group tests revealed whether people understood that life requires cooperation, that individual competence isn't enough, that relationships and community matter. But Baba Yaga also punished groups that enabled bad behavior. Story describes a man and woman who came together. Man was cruel, dishonest. Woman was kind but excused his behavior, covered for him, enabled his vices. Baba Yaga sent both away. You're kind, she told the woman, but you protect someone cruel. That makes you complicit. Enabling evil is evil. The woman learned hard lesson. Virtue requires boundaries. You can't maintain goodness while supporting badness in others, even if you love them. Group dynamic stories added nuance to Baba Yaga's judgment. Character wasn't just about individual behavior. It was about how you affected others, how you interacted with communities, whether you enabled good or evil in those around you. Now let's discuss the cultural context more deeply, examining why Baba Yaga valued these specific qualities and what this reveals about Slavic society and universal human needs. Slavic culture, particularly in rural areas during the centuries when these stories formed, valued practical virtues over abstract ones. Survival was difficult. Winters were brutal. Famines were common. Village life required cooperation, hard work, and adherence to social rules. People who couldn't or wouldn't follow these principles endangered everyone. Respect mattered because social hierarchy was real and necessary. Respecting elders, respecting authority, respecting those with knowledge or power kept communities stable. Someone who didn't show respect was dangerous, unpredictable, likely to cause conflict that could tear communities apart. Honesty mattered because lies destroyed trust, and trust was essential for survival. If you couldn't trust your neighbors to honor agreements, to tell the truth about threats, to be reliable in crisis, the whole village structure broke down. Liars were isolated, punished, sometimes exiled. Honesty was practical, not just moral. Humility mattered because arrogance led to mistakes. Someone who thought they knew better than community wisdom, who refused to learn, who couldn't acknowledge their limitations, made errors that affected everyone. Humility meant teachability, adaptability, willingness to accept help. Competence mattered because incompetent people were burdens. If you couldn't do your share of work, others had to compensate. If you couldn't complete necessary tasks, those tasks didn't get done, and everyone suffered. Competence was survival. Appropriate fear mattered because fearlessness was stupidity. The forest was dangerous. Winter was dangerous. Wild animals were dangerous. People who didn't fear real threats died, and sometimes got others killed through reckless behavior. Fear was rational response to real danger. Courage meant acting despite fear, not pretending fear didn't exist. Understanding reciprocity mattered because communities functioned on mutual obligation. You helped others, they helped you. You contributed to community. Community supported you. Someone who only took, who felt entitled to help without giving back, undermined entire social structure. Baba Yaga's tests reflected these cultural values. She rewarded the qualities that made people valuable to their communities and punished the qualities that made them destructive. She was, in a sense, enforcing social order. The threshold between civilization and wilderness was where these rules were tested most stringently. If you couldn't demonstrate these basic virtues in Baba Yaga's presence, you certainly couldn't maintain them in regular life. She also served as a check on other power structures. Kings, nobles, wealthy merchants, they had power in the village world. But in the forest, at the threshold, their power meant nothing. Baba Yaga judged character, not status. A peasant who demonstrated virtue received help. A noble who demonstrated vice received punishment. The forest was where normal hierarchies were suspended, where everyone faced the same test of character. This is why the stories resonated. They offered a fantasy of justice that didn't exist in regular feudal life. The powerful couldn't buy or threaten their way to success with Baba Yaga. They had to actually be decent people. For peasants hearing these stories, that was deeply satisfying. The world might be unfair, but at least in the forest, at least with Baba Yaga, character mattered more than status. Let's talk about Baba Yaga's relevance today, in modern contexts where few people believe in literal forest witches, but many still find her stories compelling. The core appeal remains. She represents absolute judgment based on character. In a world where wealth, status, connections, and appearance often determine outcomes more than virtue, Baba Yaga offers fantasy of pure meritocracy. With her, character is the only currency. Nothing else matters, nothing else helps. This resonates with anyone who's been frustrated by unfair systems, who's watched less deserving people succeed through advantages rather than merit, who's felt that virtue goes unrewarded while vice prospers. Baba Yaga promises that eventually, somewhere, character counts absolutely. She also represents consequences, particularly for those who think they're above them. Rich merchants, powerful nobles, arrogant sorcerers, all the people who escape consequences in normal society face reckoning with her. She doesn't care about your money or status. She'll eat you anyway if you're disrespectful. Must be nice. In an era where wealthy and powerful people frequently avoid accountability for terrible behavior, Baba Yaga represents justice. Absolute, uncompromising, unavoidable justice. That's appealing to people who see injustice everywhere and feel powerless to address it. Her tests of character also remain relevant. The qualities she values, respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, understanding of reciprocity. These are still genuinely valuable traits. People who demonstrate them still tend to succeed more than those who don't, still make better friends and partners and community members, still contribute more positively to the world. Baba Yaga stories remind us that character development isn't optional. It's not just about being a good person for moral satisfaction. It's practical. Your character determines how you handle difficulties, whether people help you when you need it, whether you can build relationships based on trust, whether you eventually succeed or fail. Modern self-help culture often promises success through techniques, hacks, strategies. Baba Yaga offers older wisdom. Develop character. Be honest. Work hard. Show respect. Control your fear. Understand obligations. These aren't exciting recommendations. They're not quick fixes, but they work over time in ways tricks and shortcuts don't. She's basically the anti-influencer. There's also something valuable in Baba Yaga's absolute standards. She doesn't make exceptions for difficult circumstances, traumatic backgrounds, or good intentions. She judges behavior, period. Either you demonstrated good character or you didn't. Context explains behavior but doesn't excuse it. This can seem harsh. Modern moral thinking emphasizes understanding context, having compassion for people's struggles, recognizing that circumstances shape behavior. All true and important. But Baba Yaga represents the counterbalance. At some point, regardless of context, you're responsible for your own behavior. You don't get infinite excuses. Someone who suffered trauma and struggles with relationships, they deserve compassion and help. But if they're cruel to others, they're still being cruel. Their trauma explains it but doesn't justify it. Baba Yaga would judge the cruelty itself. She'd see the cause but still respond to the behavior. This tension between compassion and accountability runs through modern moral debates. Baba Yaga lands firmly on one side. Accountability. Behavior matters. Intentions don't excuse impact. You're judged by what you do, not why you did it or what made you that way. This isn't the whole answer to moral questions, but it's a necessary part. Pure compassion without accountability becomes enabling. Baba Yaga reminds us that standards matter, that people must be held responsible for their behavior regardless of mitigating circumstances. Let's talk about what Baba Yaga teaches about power and how to approach those who hold it. Her stories are master classes in negotiating with the powerful from a position of weakness. Most visitors came to her desperate, vulnerable, needing things they couldn't obtain themselves. They had no leverage. She had all the power, and yet many succeeded. How? By understanding that even absolute power responds to certain behaviors. Respect costs nothing and gains you hearing. Honesty prevents waste of the powerful person's time. Humility acknowledges reality. Competence proves you're worth investing in. Appropriate fear shows you understand stakes. Reciprocity demonstrates you're not just taking. These principles apply to negotiating with bosses, dealing with government bureaucracy, requesting help from anyone with more power than you. You can't force powerful people to help you, but you can behave in ways that make them more inclined to help. Baba Yaga's stories also teach what doesn't work. Flattery, manipulation, demands, threats, attempts to trick or control, these fail catastrophically. Powerful people see through flattery. They resent manipulation. Demands anger them. Threats make you an enemy. Attempts to trick them result in retaliation. The only reliable approach is genuine good character demonstrated consistently. This doesn't guarantee help. Baba Yaga sometimes refused assistance, even to people who passed her tests. But it maximizes your chances while maintaining your integrity. Modern power dynamics are obviously more complex than fairy tales, but the core insights remain valid. Character matters even when dealing with those who could crush you. Perhaps especially then. There's a deeper lesson about thresholds and transitions. Baba Yaga lived at boundaries. between village and forest, civilization and wilderness, human world and spirit world. She guarded these transitions. Meeting her meant crossing from one state to another. Life is full of such transitions. Childhood to adulthood, single to married, student to professional, healthy to ill, living to dying. Every major transition is a threshold, and thresholds are dangerous. Old rules stop applying. New rules aren't clear yet. You're vulnerable, uncertain, tested. Baba Yaga stories teach that thresholds require proving yourself. You can't coast through transitions on past success or status. Each threshold requires demonstrating character anew. The skills and qualities that got you to the threshold must be proven again to pass through it. This is why people struggle with major life transitions. They expect their previous character and achievements to carry them through automatically. But thresholds are tests. You must prove you're ready for what comes next. If you're not ready, if your character isn't sufficient, the transition breaks you or forces you back. Understanding life as series of thresholds, each requiring character proof, helps make sense of why some people succeed in new phases while others fail despite past success. The threshold doesn't care what you did before. It cares whether you can demonstrate necessary qualities now. Baba Yaga is every threshold personified, every transition you'll face, every moment where who you've been must prove sufficient for who you need to become. Respect the threshold. Approach honestly. Show humility. Demonstrate competence. Feel appropriate fear. Understand you must earn passage. These principles apply to every major life transition. Now let's discuss what scholars and interpreters have said about Baba Yaga, and how their analyses both illuminate and sometimes miss what makes her compelling. Psychological interpretations, particularly Jungian ones, see Baba Yaga as an archetypal figure representing the shadow self, the dark feminine, the dangerous but necessary aspects of the psyche. Meeting her represents confronting your own darkness, your own capacity for cruelty, your own mortality. Passing her tests means integrating these shadow elements, acknowledging them without being consumed by them. This interpretation has value. The stories do involve confronting fear, facing danger, acknowledging your own limitations and flaws. Baba Yaga forces honest self-assessment. She strips away pretense. You can't maintain comfortable illusions about yourself in her presence. But this psychological reading also flattens her. She becomes metaphor, symbol, projection of internal processes. She loses her quality as external force, as entity with her own reality and purposes. The stories work better if Baba Yaga is real within their world, not just psychological allegory. Feminist interpretations see her as female power refusing patriarchal control. She lives alone, commands respect from men and women equally, judges based on character rather than gender, represents a kind of female authority that existed outside and prior to Christian patriarchal structures. This interpretation also has merit. In a culture where women's power was severely constrained, Baba Yaga represented radical female independence. She answered to no man, no father, no husband, no king. Her power was intrinsic, not derived from male authority. For women hearing these stories, this must have been quietly thrilling, even if also frightening. But again, this interpretation risks reducing her to symbol. She becomes representation of feminist principles rather than character in her own right. The stories work better if she's Baba Yaga specifically, not just empowered woman figure. Anthropological interpretations connect her to pre-Christian Slavic beliefs, possibly degraded goddess figures, shamanic traditions, or death guardian roles in older religions. She's seen as remnant of ancient practices, surviving in folklore after Christianity suppressed original religious contexts. Evidence supports this to some degree. Her association with forests, boundaries, death, and transformation suggests connections to older spiritual traditions. The chicken-legged hut might derive from ancient funeral practices, where bodies were placed on platforms above ground. The bone fence could relate to prehistoric burial customs. But these connections are speculative. We don't have enough information about pre-Christian Slavic religion to definitively map Baba Yaga onto specific earlier deities. She might be degraded goddess, might be completely folkloric creation, might be combination of multiple influences. The uncertainty is part of her mystery. Literary critics analyze her role in narrative structure. She's threshold guardian, catalyst for hero's journey, test that must be passed, source of magical aid. They note how she functions similarly to figures in other cultures. The old crone who tests heroes, the witch at the crossroads, the dangerous helper who aids if properly approached. These structural analyses are accurate, but somewhat boring. Yes, she fills archetypal narrative role. But what makes her compelling isn't her narrative function. It's her specific qualities. The iron teeth, the walking hut, the bone fence, the particular combination of danger and potential help. The details matter more than the abstract structure. What's often missing from academic interpretations is appreciation for the stories as stories, enjoyed by people who believe them or half believe them, told around fires for centuries before anyone wrote them down or analyzed them. The stories worked because they entertained while teaching, frightened while reassuring, acknowledged darkness while offering hope that virtue mattered. Sometimes a bone fence is just a bone fence, not a metaphor for patriarchal structures. Modern analyses can illuminate aspects of the tales, but shouldn't replace direct engagement with them. The stories themselves remain primary. Everything else is commentary. Let's talk about regional variations in how Baba Yaga was portrayed and what qualities she emphasized most. Because while the core remained consistent, local cultures adapted her to their specific needs. In Russian versions, she's often singular, living deep in the forest, testing heroes on epic quests. The emphasis is on individual character, proving itself through trials. Very much in line with the hero journey structure common in Russian folklore. Russian Baba Yaga emphasized respect and humility most strongly. The cultural context valued knowing your place in hierarchy, acknowledging authority, maintaining social order. Ukrainian versions sometimes present her in threes. 3 Baba Yaga sisters, each guarding a different part of the forest, each with slightly different personalities and standards. Visitors might have to pass all 3 to receive help. This reflects Ukrainian emphasis on community and collective judgment. Not one authority figure, but multiple perspectives. Ukrainian Baba Yaga emphasized honesty more. Ukrainian history involved more betrayals, occupations, forced treaties. Trust was precious because betrayal was common. Polish versions are sometimes more explicitly dangerous, less likely to help, more likely to eat visitors, regardless of their character. The threshold between helpful and harmful is thinner. This might reflect Poland's more traumatic historical experiences, more suspicion of power, less faith in fair judgment. Polish Baba Yaga emphasized appropriate fear. Polish history was traumatic. Partitions, occupations, constant warfare. Survivors were those who recognized danger accurately and responded appropriately. Belarusian versions emphasized competence and hard work most. The harsh climate and difficult agricultural conditions meant survival required genuine skill. Baba Yaga in Belarusian tales assigns more difficult practical tasks, values completion more than other regions. Baltic region versions, where Slavic and Baltic cultures mixed, emphasized understanding reciprocity more. Trading cultures value fair exchange. Baba Yaga in these versions is more explicitly transactional. Provide something of value, receive help of equivalent value. These regional emphases reflect what each culture struggled with, what they valued in community members, what qualities best predicted survival in their specific circumstances. Baba Yaga adapted to local needs while maintaining core function, testing character and rewarding virtue. In some regions, she's connected to Slavic pre-Christian deities, possibly a remnant of an ancient goddess figure, degraded by Christian influence into a witch, but retaining elements of divine judgment. In these versions, she's older than Christianity, her authority predating the church, her magic connected to nature rather than demons. Other regions connect her to winter, to death, to the season when the world dies and might not return. She becomes associated with the longest nights, the coldest months, the time when survival is most difficult. Her tests reflect winter's tests. Can you endure? Can you persist? Can you maintain virtue when everything is hard and dark? Now let's discuss what makes a compelling Baba Yaga story versus a mediocre one, because understanding the craft helps appreciate why certain tales persist while others fade. Good Baba Yaga stories maintain ambiguity about whether she help or harm. The visitor doesn't know outcome. The audience doesn't know outcome. Tension persists until judgment is rendered. Bad stories telegraph results too early. You know the arrogant noble will be eaten. You know the kind peasant will be helped. Predictability drains suspense. Good stories give Baba Yaga genuine personality. Her iron teeth catch light in specific ways. Her voice has particular quality. Her movements suggest age and power simultaneously. She feels like distinct individual, not generic witch. Bad stories make her interchangeable with any fairy tale antagonist. Good stories integrate tests naturally into plot. Tasks don't feel arbitrary. They connect to visitors' needs or character. They reveal information. They drive story forward. Bad stories interrupt narrative for tests that feel like checklist items. Clean hut, check. Fetch water, check. Sort seeds, check. Good stories show character through action. Visitors demonstrate virtue or vice through what they do, how they speak, how they react to difficulty. Bad stories tell rather than show. She was humble instead of showing humility through behavior. Good stories respect the forest setting. It's not just backdrop. It's active presence, shaping story, testing visitors before they reach Baba Yaga. Bad stories treat forest as mere location, missing opportunities to develop atmosphere and additional layers of testing. Good stories leave some questions unanswered. They don't explain everything. They trust audience to accept mystery. Bad stories over-explain, adding unnecessary backstory, rationalizing magic, removing mystery that makes Baba Yaga compelling. Good stories have consequences that extend beyond immediate interaction. The help Baba Yaga provides affects visitors' entire life. The punishment for failures has lasting impact. Bad stories end too neatly, without exploring ripple effects. Good stories maintain moral complexity. Baba Yaga isn't purely good or evil. Visitors might be flawed people who still deserve help, or mostly good people with one crucial failing. Bad stories are morally simplistic, with perfectly virtuous heroes and completely vicious villains. The best Baba Yaga stories feel like they could actually happen in a world that believed in magic. They follow internal logic. Baba Yaga's judgments make sense. Tests are fair even when harsh. Outcomes feel earned. The magic is wondrous, but has rules and costs. Let's talk about the loneliness in Baba Yaga stories, because it's present, but rarely discussed explicitly. Baba Yaga lives alone. She's feared. Few visitors survive meeting her. She exists in isolation, maintaining boundaries, judging endlessly, rarely experiencing genuine connection. Some stories hint at sadness in this. When someone demonstrates true virtue, when they pass all tests with genuine good character, Baba Yaga sometimes seems almost grateful, as if meeting a genuinely good person is rare enough to be precious even to her. There's a story where after helping a particularly virtuous visitor, Baba Yaga walks them to the edge of her territory and says quietly, "You were a pleasure to meet." That happens rarely. "Thank you." The visitor is confused. Shouldn't they be thanking her? She gave them magical help, solved impossible problems. But Baba Yaga is thanking them. For what? For proving that good people exist. For demonstrating that her standards, high as they are, can be met, for validating that the qualities she values are real and achievable, for being proof that she's not judging against impossible criteria. Most visitors fail. Most are too arrogant, too dishonest, too entitled to pass her tests. Over centuries of this, does she wonder if she's wrong? If her standards are too high? If virtue is actually impossible, and she's judging people against unattainable ideals? When someone passes, they prove she's not wrong. Virtue is possible. Good people exist. Her judgment is fair. That's worth gratitude. That's worth a quiet thank you to someone who'll probably never fully understand what they've given her. This adds tragic dimension to Baba Yaga. She maintains standards because someone must. She tests because tests are necessary. She judges because judgment must be rendered. But doing this forever, alone, watching most people fail, eating those who fail worst, it's probably lonely. The job description didn't mention the isolation. The few who pass, who demonstrate real virtue, they don't just receive help. They give something to Baba Yaga too. Validation, connection, evidence that her long, lonely vigil serves purpose, that good people exist worth helping, that the world hasn't become entirely corrupt. Finally, let's talk about the forest one last time, because the forest is where all this happens. And understanding the forest completes understanding Baba Yaga. The forest represents everything beyond human control. Nature that doesn't care about human needs. Danger that doesn't recognize human authority. Reality that functions by its own rules, regardless of what humans want or believe. Entering the forest meant leaving the world where social status, wealth, connections, and appearances mattered. Entering world where only practical skills, genuine character, and accurate perception mattered. The forest stripped away everything except what was real. This is why Baba Yaga lived there. The forest was perfect location for her function. She judged based on reality, on who people actually were. The forest ensured that by the time visitors reached her, pretense had already been eroded by fear, exhaustion, danger. The forest also represented death. People who entered died symbolically, leaving behind their social identities. Those who emerged were born, transformed by experience. Baba Yaga mediated this death and rebirth process. She determined whether symbolic death became literal or led to transformation. The forest was alive in these stories. Not metaphorically. Genuinely alive, conscious, responsive. It created paths or closed them. It allowed passage or refused it. It tested travelers through disorientation, danger, fear. The forest itself judged who was worthy to reach Baba Yaga. This means Baba Yaga wasn't working alone. She was part of a larger system. The forest pre-screened visitors. Those who reached her had already passed initial tests. Courage to enter, persistence to continue, strength to survive. She dealt only with people who'd proven basic competence by arriving. This makes her role more specialized. She's not general tester of humanity. She's advanced examination for those who've passed preliminary screening. The forest handles basic competence. She tests character. Together, they form complete evaluation system. The relationship between Baba Yaga and the forest varies by story. Sometimes she commands it. Sometimes she cooperates with it. Sometimes they seem to be different aspects of the same entity. The boundary between witch and forest blurs. This ambiguity suggests Baba Yaga isn't entirely separate from nature. She's liminal, not just in location, but in being. Part human, part forest, part spirit, part something else. She exists at threshold between categories of existence, as well as between geographic locations. The forest also provides context for why her standards matter so much. The forest kills incompetent people. It's not malicious, it's just dangerous. Natural dangers don't care about your feelings or intentions. Wolves don't spare you because you meant well. Cold doesn't relent because you're trying hard. Baba Yaga's harsh judgment mirrors natural reality. She's preparing people for a world where character and competence determine survival. Her tests simulate life or death stakes, because life actually has life or death stakes. She's not being cruel. She's being realistic. The forest teaches that nature is indifferent. Baba Yaga teaches that morality matters despite indifference. Together they present complete worldview. Reality is harsh and uncaring, but virtue still matters, perhaps especially because reality is harsh. Character determines whether you survive and whether survival is worth achieving. Contemporary relevance. We still have forests. Not literal woods, though those exist, but metaphorical wildernesses where normal rules don't apply. Serious illness, profound loss, crisis that strips away comfort and certainty. Everyone eventually enters some forest, faces some threshold where pretense fails and character matters. The GPS still doesn't work there either. Baba Yaga is there, in one form or another. The test that can't be faked. The judgment based on who you actually are. The threshold that determines whether you emerge transformed or don't emerge at all. So why did Baba Yaga help some visitors and eat others? Because she judged character. Because she maintained standards. Because she performed essential role of testing people at thresholds, rewarding those who demonstrated virtue, punishing those who didn't. She helped those who showed respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, and understanding of reciprocity. She punished those who failed these tests. The pattern was consistent across centuries, across regions, across countless stories. The principles absolute. The judgment fair, harsh, but ultimately just. She represented hope that character matters, that virtue determines outcomes, that justice exists even when not immediately visible, that there are moments, thresholds, tests where you can't fake who you are, where reality demands you prove your character or face consequences. And she represented necessary harshness, that standards matter, that not everyone deserves help, that some people are genuinely dangerous and must be removed, that mercy is valuable but can't be infinite, that judgment must be rendered even when difficult. The stories persist because they address fundamental human experiences. Everyone faces tests of character. Everyone crosses thresholds where past success doesn't guarantee future passage. Everyone wonders whether their virtue matters in an unjust world. Everyone hopes that somewhere, somehow, character actually determines outcomes. Baba Yaga promises that it does. Not everywhere. Not always. But at crucial moments, at thresholds, at transitions, character is what matters. Everything else falls away. And when pretense fails, when you can't hide behind status or wealth or connections, who you actually are determines what happens next. This is frightening and reassuring simultaneously. Frightening because you might fail. You might not have developed the character necessary to pass. You might be the arrogant merchant or the vain woman whose skull ends up lighting the fence. Reassuring because if you have developed character, if you've been honest and respectful and humble and competent, that virtue will matter. It will be recognized. It will be rewarded. As stories don't promise life is fair overall. They promise specific moments exist where fairness is absolute, where Baba Yaga or forces like her judge purely based on character. That's enough to make developing virtue worthwhile. That's enough to suggest the long, difficult work of becoming a good person serves practical purpose beyond moral satisfaction. The forest remains. Somewhere beyond the edge of every settled place, beyond the boundaries of every comfortable life, the wilderness persists. The threshold exists. The test awaits. Stories continue being told. Children still listen, wondering if they would pass Baba Yaga's tests. Teenagers wonder if they're developing the character they'll need. Adults reflect, considering whether their choices have built virtue or undermined it. Elderly people look back, evaluating whether they passed the thresholds they faced. The hut still walks on chicken legs somewhere in imagination. The fence of bones still stands, skulls glowing in darkness, warning and promising simultaneously. Inside the hut, patient as stone, ancient as the forest itself, Baba Yaga waits. She waits for the next soul brave enough or desperate enough to seek her out. The next person who needs help only she can provide. The next test subject who will either demonstrate the character she values or fail and face consequences. The door will turn. The tests will begin. And once again, character will be all that matters. Whether you would receive help or become part of the fence depends entirely on who you are, not who you claim to be, not who you wish you were, not who you present yourself as in comfortable circumstances, who you actually are when tested, when pretense fails, when fear rises, when the easy answers don't work, when character determines everything. Baba Yaga knows. She always knows. She's been watching for centuries, judging for centuries, maintaining her standards while the world changes around her. Empires have risen and fallen. Technologies have transformed human life. Beliefs have shifted. Cultures have evolved. But character remains character. Virtue remains virtue. The tests remain essentially the same. The forest watches. The trees remember everyone who enters. The paths shift for each traveler, testing persistence and determination. The skulls glow on the fence, each one a story, a warning, a failure that teaches those who come after. And the question remains, as relevant now as centuries ago, as urgent today as when these stories were first told around fires in wooden houses while winter raged outside. If you found yourself at that fence, if you called to that hut, if the door turned and you stepped inside, if you faced those iron teeth and that penetrating ancient gaze, would you walk away with help? Would you demonstrate the respect that acknowledges reality, the honesty that builds trust, the humility that permits growth, the competence that proves you're worth investing in, the appropriate fear that shows accurate perception, the understanding of reciprocity that maintains fair exchange? Or would you fail? Would arrogance blind you to danger? Would dishonesty poison the interaction? Would entitlement replace gratitude? Would incompetence reveal itself under pressure? Would you freeze with fear or charge ahead with foolish recklessness? Would you demand rather than request, take rather than trade? The answer depends on choices you're making right now. Today, this moment. Character isn't built in crisis. It's built daily through small decisions, repeated behaviors, accumulated habits. Every time you choose honesty over convenient lies, respect over casual rudeness, humility over arrogance, competence over laziness, courage over cowardice, fairness over exploitation, you're preparing. Preparing for tests you don't know you'll face. Developing virtue you might need someday. Becoming someone who could pass Baba Yaga's judgment, or someone who couldn't. The stories suggest it's worth trying, worth the daily effort, worth being honest when lies would be easier, worth showing respect when rudeness would satisfy, worth staying humble when arrogance would feel good, worth working hard when cutting corners would save time, worth feeling fear appropriately when pretending courage would seem braver, worth giving fairly when taking more would benefit you. Because somewhere, at some threshold you'll eventually cross, someone or something will judge. Maybe not a literal witch in a walking house surrounded by bones. Maybe just reality itself, stripping away pretense, demanding you prove who you actually are. Reality doesn't accept excuses either. Maybe a crisis that reveals character. A transition that requires demonstrating virtue. A moment where everything depends on whether you've developed the strength, honesty, humility, and competence necessary to pass through. And in that moment, what you've become through all those small daily choices will determine what happens next. Baba Yaga's tests never really end. They just take different forms. The forest is everywhere. The threshold is everywhere. The judgment is everywhere. And the iron-toothed witch, in one form or another, is always watching. Somewhere beyond the tree line, where civilization ends and the old ways persist, Where the familiar becomes strange and the safe becomes dangerous, a hut stands on chicken legs. Smoke rises from the chimney. Skulls glow on the fence, lighting the perimeter with cold fire. And inside, stretched across the warm oven, all bones and angles and iron teeth, ancient and patient and absolutely fair, Baba Yaga waits for the next visitor who finds their way through the trees. The door will turn. The tests will begin. The judgment will be rendered. And character, as always, will be all that matters. Before we close, let's talk one more time about what these stories teach us about the nature of justice itself. Because Baba Yaga represents a very specific kind of fairness that's worth understanding. Modern justice systems try to be fair through process. Rules, procedures, appeals, considerations of circumstances. They aim for consistency through standardization. Everyone gets the same procedure, the same rights, the same theoretical access to justice. Baba Yaga represents older concept of justice, direct judgment by someone who sees clearly. No procedures, no appeals, no lengthy deliberations. She looks at you, tests you briefly, and renders judgment. Immediate, absolute, final. This seems terrifying from modern perspective. What about due process? What about second chances? What about considering circumstances and backgrounds and mitigating factors? But Baba Yaga would say, I see all that. I see your circumstances. I see what made you who you are. And I still judge what you are, not why you are it. Because ultimately, reality doesn't care about your reasons. The forest doesn't spare you because you had difficult childhood. The wolf doesn't stop because you meant well. Results matter. Character matters. Intentions don't change outcomes. This is harsh but honest. Modern justice tries to be compassionate by considering contexts. Baba Yaga is honest by judging results. Both approaches have value. Both reveal truths about fairness. Her form of justice also eliminates the advantage wealthy and powerful usually have in legal systems. You can't hire better representation before Baba Yaga. You can't use connections or status. You can't delay proceedings until memories fade. You stand before her as you actually are, and she judges. Rich and poor face identical evaluation. No lawyers, no appeals, no settlements. Just you and a witch with iron teeth. This is why the stories remain appealing. They represent justice that can't be corrupted, delayed, or manipulated. Pure evaluation of character, accessible to everyone, immune to systemic inequalities. The stories also teach that justice requires standards. Baba Yaga doesn't adjust her principles based on who's being judged. A quality is valuable, or it isn't. Behavior is acceptable, or it isn't. The rules don't change. Modern approaches often emphasize flexibility, considering individual circumstances, adapting standards to contexts. This has benefits, but also costs. When standards are too flexible, they become meaningless. When everyone gets special consideration, no one does. Baba Yaga reminds us that some standards should be absolute. Honesty, respect, basic human decency. These don't become optional because circumstances were difficult. They're requirements regardless of context. This tension between absolute standards and contextual compassion runs through all moral philosophy. Baba Yaga lands firmly on one side. Standards matter more than circumstances. This isn't the complete answer, but it's necessary corrective when culture overemphasizes excuses and underemphasizes accountability. The stories also teach that justice requires consequences. Baba Yaga doesn't just judge. She acts on her judgments. Help for those who pass. Punishment for those who fail. The judgment means something because it has real effects. Modern systems often separate judgment from consequences. People are found guilty, but punishments are delayed, reduced, sometimes never implemented. This undermines justice's educative function. If consequences don't reliably follow judgment, why take judgment seriously? Baba Yaga's immediate consequences teach that actions matter, character matters, choices have results. This lesson works because it's consistently enforced. Every visitor faces same evaluation and same consequence structure. Finally, the stories teach that justice itself can be frightening, even when fair, even when necessary. Baba Yaga terrifies visitors despite being ultimately fair. Her fairness doesn't make her safe. Justice that truly holds people accountable is always somewhat frightening, because it means you can't escape consequences of your own character and choices. This is why people sometimes prefer systems that are unjust but predictable, corrupt but navigable. Real justice is harder, scarier, more demanding. It requires actually being good, not just appearing good or knowing how to work the system. Baba Yaga stories suggest this frightening fairness is worth having anyway. That even though facing absolute judgment is terrifying, it's better than systems that judge based on wealth, status, or ability to manipulate process. The fear of being truly seen and judged fairly is better than the cynicism of knowing justice is for sale. So we return to the beginning. The forest, the fence, the hut, the witch with iron teeth who guards the threshold between worlds. She helps those who demonstrate virtue. She punishes those who demonstrate vice. The pattern is clear. The rules are consistent. The judgment is fair. And whether you would receive help or become part of the fence depends on who you've become through all the choices you've made, large and small, seen and unseen, throughout your life. The stories end. But the forest never ends. The threshold persists. And somewhere, patient and ancient and absolutely fair, Baba Yaga waits. Character matters. Virtue matters. The daily work of becoming a good person matters. Because eventually, everyone faces their threshold. Everyone meets their Baba Yaga. Everyone discovers whether the character they've developed is sufficient for the challenges they face. The stories have given us the formula, the pattern, the rules. 6 qualities that matter: respect, honesty, humility, competence, appropriate fear, understanding of reciprocity. Develop these, maintain these, demonstrate these, and you pass. Fail them, and you fail. It's that simple, that clear, that fair. No fine print, no exceptions, no loopholes. And that is why Baba Yaga helped some visitors and ate others.